Good. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, November the 4th. Call the meeting to order at 6:30. We will begin, as we always do, with the playing of the national anthem. So if you're able, I would ask you to stand and join us. We'd like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Shelburne resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. These traditional territories upon which we live, work, play, and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions, and it is with this statement we declare to honor and respect past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. Standard reminder to members to declare any pecuniary interest that you may have. Anything on tonight's agenda? See any now. If something comes up through the meeting, by all means, make that disclosure at that point. On to the minutes from our October 28th meeting. Can I have a mover and seconder to adopt those minutes as circulated? By Councillor Guichardi, seconded by Councillor Sample. Discussion on those. Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, that takes us to public question period. I know that we do have a group out in the gallery in the overflow section. There's essentially going to be two public portions embedded in tonight's agenda. This public question period is sort of the standard general public question period, which is a part of every agenda. If you're planning on asking a question related to the budget, I would ask that you wait until we get to the public budget portion of the meeting a little later in the agenda. But if you do have a more general question, just about something that the council is up to, that would be the time now to ask those general questions. So I'll wait a second to see if anybody comes in to ask anything at this point. We didn't receive anything electronically.
No, sir.
Okay.
I spoke to the folks that are in the lobby. They're here for the public budget.
Okay, I assume that was the case, so, okay. All right, on to presentations. We do have one presentation this evening, as well as two proclamations. We'll deal with the presentation first, so we are joined by Dr. Catania and her colleagues from the North Dufferin Wellness Center. I'll invite you up to the table if you wish, and
thank you.
Make your presentation.
So thank you, Council, for having us here today. My name is Dr. Amy Catania, and I'm here representing the North Dufferin Wellness Center. I have my colleagues, Dr. Natasha Gill, Dr. Sonia Crusoe, and David Egbert, who's a physiotherapist here in town. I've been a full-time comprehensive family physician in Dufferin County for almost 20 years now. It's hard to think that it goes back that long, but it has. In December of 2012, I was actually recruited to Shelburne particularly to help solve a problem that had been ongoing and historical here in Shelburne. Healthcare had been a struggle up to that point in terms of getting physicians to the community. There was a revolving door of family physicians at that point in time, and many residents did not have a family physician. And if you did, you probably waited months for an appointment. Within a couple of years, I was able to actually recruit 6 family physicians. And as a result, we had a successful amalgamation of the Malloway Family Health Team with the Dufferin Area Family Health Team, which really increased the amount of resources, the healthcare resources that were available to the residents here in Shelburne. In 2018, I decided to continue my ongoing commitment to community-based care and really comprehensive family medicine. And I decided to separate my practice. And Dr. Gill came along with me, and with a conversation with David Egbert and a couple of the other local healthcare providers, we decided that we wanted to set up a patient medical home model of care. We were able to recruit Dr. Caruso at that point in time. And currently we care for about 3,700 patients here in the community. We employ 4 staff in our clinic, and that's just the family physician clinic. It doesn't include the number of patients which are being cared for amongst the entire clinic. Our goal was really to create a patient medical home, which is, I'm not sure if you're aware of what that looks like, but it really is a collaborative model that provides a one-stop shop to healthcare, which makes the needs of the patients better cared for. So again, we began working with David Egbert, Sanjay Lenke, who's a local pharmacist and business owner, and we looked at a clinical model to help really with the care of our patients. And in 2018, we moved to a temporary space at 712 Main Street East. Those of us who've been here a while know it as the old Dufferin Mutual building. We started renovations there, and Drs. Gill, Caruso, and I personally spent almost $250,000 on the renovations of our space alone. And again, that's just our space, not the rest of the building. Our goal was to stay there for as many years as we can. We signed a 5-year lease, renewable for another 3-year term. And our eventual goal was actually to purchase the building if we had that available to us, and really build that model of team-based care. I'm sure you've been listening to the news and listening to the Jane Philpott announcement, but really that's what Dr. Philpott is planning on, and something that we currently have here in Shelburne. Unfortunately, we're seeing that this will not likely come to fruition, and we don't feel that this is any fault of our own. I've sent a document out to you previously that really talks about our struggle over the last 8 years. We've had 3 business owners. We've had unpaid utility bills. You all know that we've had many unpaid taxes that the town has seen that we have personally paid off as well. There's molding drywall, dead animals, live animals in the building. And this is what we're doing, trying to manage a building like this while we're caring for patients in the community. Those of you who are business owners yourself, I ask, how much would you tolerate? How much money would you put in yourself before you say, I can't do this anymore, we have to come up either with another option or we have to leave? And that's the point that we're at right now. A quick reminder about how healthcare works in Ontario. Family physicians are struggling across the entire province. We're trying to balance our business needs as well as patient care, but unlike other businesses, family doctors cannot increase the prices that we put towards our patients. The prices we get paid, our OHIP fees, are static. They don't change. Counties, businesses, they can increase their prices. You guys can increase your levies. We don't have the ability to do that. So our overhead has increased. We all know staffing costs have increased. Our medical records have increased. Insurance, supplies, even snow clearing. All of these things are costing us more and more. And these are well beyond inflation that these numbers have increased, but we're doing this and we're trying to manage a building that's in disrepair. We're trying to manage complex patients. We're trying to get people seen amongst the ever-ending wait times of patients as well. Back to the building issues in January of 2022, we decided we couldn't do this anymore and we had to take some legal action. Again, you guys have some information, but a quick summary about that. Our second landlord out of the 3 took our money. He did not pay taxes. He did not pay hydro bills, gas bills, water bills, and other bills, resulting in ongoing threats for these things to be shut down. We had a threat with Hydro a couple of weeks ago coming in saying that they were shutting us down. This is a medical clinic. Lack of maintenance on the property. If you've driven by the property recently, you'll see that the property is in disrepair. There's been potholes in the parking lot, leaking basements. The elevator has broken many, many times. And we've paid for those repairs ourselves, in addition to the lease payments and the TMI that we have already paid to the landlord. Our second landlord now has an arrest warrant out. His passport is being flagged. And despite this, our legal case has no end in sight. It just keeps getting pushed further and further. The mortgage holder for the second landlord sold the building on sale to a third landlord. And this is despite us actually putting an offer of sale at higher than the purchase price. Unfortunately, our third landlord has not responded to a request for review of our lease, subsequent offers to purchase, or maintenance of the building. Our lease has expired. So our lease expired in October of 2023 with our second landlord, and we've been moving on a month-to-month lease, hoping for arbitration, but the third landlord fails to negotiate with us. But again, I ask how many of you would want to stay in a building in its disrepair, given the experience that we've had. Last month, we received a letter from the lawyer of the third landlord, saying that he did not recognize our lease, and that either we signed his lease with the increased payment or we needed to be out by December 31st, hence my letter to you all asking for support. So after 5 years with many corrupt landowners, again, we personally invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into the healthcare of this community. We just can't continue along this path. In July, we met with Denise and Minister Sylvia Jones. Unfortunately, we were told we needed to invest more money in the community and move out to another location, spend more of our own money into a new location. At this point, we don't feel that that is financially feasible. So what we're asking today is for some help. This isn't happening across Ontario. I mean, this is not specific to Shelburne, where family physicians and healthcare clinics are really struggling. A lot of the attention is placed on recruiting physicians to communities, but I think we need to focus on how do we retain physicians in communities. Municipalities, I know some municipalities are looking for building of infrastructure to build these patient medical homes with the idea if you build it, they will come, and if you build it, we will stay. All we're asking for is a stable location with a stable landlord, with a roof that doesn't leak, and we're asking to have some help to figure out where that could be so that we can continue to provide for the needs of the community. The current clinical infrastructure in Shelburne, clinical specifically, is county owned. So if we're talking about the Mel Lloyd, that is county owned. Right now, we're told that it's not large enough, the space available to house us. Currently, the rent there is actually at par with what we are paying. And moving would significantly increase the inequity across the healthcare resources of the community, resulting in us paying significantly more than our counterparts. We love Shelburne. We probably care for a bunch of your family members, your friends. We know our patients need us. We know there's no public transportation in this community, but we will have to leave if nothing can come out of this. And what we're asking for is some help to stay. So options. Obviously, staying in our current location would be ideal. We've invested a significant amount of money in this current location. Options that we've thought about are, is there a way for the town of Shelburne to hold the lease for the space and prorate the rent to us in that way? We figure you may have some more negotiating and legal power than what we have. Alternately, would the town be able to pay the difference between the current rent and what the landlord is actually asking? Or is there some pressure that could be put on, another organization, whether it be yourselves as the town or the county, to purchase the building? So that way we would then have a stable landlord. We've talked about Denise, and we've had a conversation about what is the 5-year plan for this community when it comes to healthcare. Most communities need to look at what are their 5-year healthcare plans, and back to, if you build it, they will come. You could build a new healthcare facility in the community. That's an option. However, there is a building that has 15,000 square feet right now that could be used for healthcare in the community. Unfortunately, 5 years doesn't help us. We have about 6 weeks if you take into Christmas holidays, and we have to make decisions about where we're going to go. We need about 2,500 square feet for us, the physicians alone. David would probably need about 2,500 square feet. And when we look at all the options that have been provided to us by yourselves, you guys keep sending us options, which is great. None of those are big enough for us to be housed, even us as the physicians. The Malloyd is there, absolutely. They have 1,000 square feet, not enough space. And they do have a large meeting room, which is very occasionally used. And unfortunately, they say they're not willing to redevelop that into a clinical space. Is there an opportunity for you to advocate on our behalf to the county to say, can they redevelop some of that space for temporary healthcare while we work on a 5-year plan together? There are other spaces that are available in town. 713 Industrial Drive is probably the only other option that would be doable. It is probably a little bit too large for all of us physicians to be there together. We would have to bring someone like David in to be able to fill that extra space. But again, how do we fund those leasehold improvements? We've already, again, spent significant amount of money. We can't spend that money again. So we would be looking at some support, requesting some support for any leasehold improvements going into a temporary space. So bottom line is we're here to ask for your help. Healthcare can't be accomplished alone. We've tried everything that we can think of to make the current location work. Simply put, without your help, we really had no option but relocating to another community. We have already been in discussions with other communities to see what options are available. I don't want this to come across as fear mongering or an ultimatum, but unfortunately it is the reality we face. And I think as business owners, you probably understand that this is the reality. And as clinicians, small business owners, we want to be clear, this is not what we want to do, but for the survival of our business, this may be something we have to do, and that we're not asking for a blank check. We're not asking to not pay rent. That is not the ask here. We've invested a significant amount of money, but we cannot invest more in a community that's not willing to invest in us. So what we're asking for you to do is to look at options and to really look at how do you invest in the healthcare needs of your residents. We want to stay in Shelburne, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And these guys, I'm sure, are available to answer any questions as much as we can.
Okay. Questions? First of all, it's amazing how one bad landlord can screw up a whole community.
Three.
That's okay.
There's 3 now.
A consecutive group of 3 landlords can screw up a whole community. I'm a landlord myself, and I'm just appalled. I would never even consider doing half of this stuff or a quarter. I mean, this is outrageous. In terms, you mentioned something about making up the difference on, like, what are you looking at in terms of numbers?
Mm-hmm. So Denise has all the numbers.
Okay.
I've sent all those to her so she can share those with you. Right now, the difference in just, if we went with what this new landlord wants for the next year, it would be an additional rent of $4,000 per month. That's how much he has increased the rent. That's just for us. That does not include David's space, the pharmacy space, the hearing space. That is just us for the positions, 4,000 extra per month.
Do we have numbers for Dave?
I don't have an option. He has told me that he's not interested in having a second vote. He's down, so I'm not.
He's been evicted as of December 31st.
Is there an option?
I'm gone.
Yeah, what? I don't understand what he's gonna do with the space then. Nobody's there, nobody's paying him, so.
He also hasn't cashed our last 7 months of rent checks, and we're not sure exactly what the motivation for that was.
Yeah, what is strategy? Like, what's the strategy there? Can't figure it out.
Yeah.
We thought it was just the cash that we heard out,
And have
and then
something
it gets
against
us to evict us, so we purposely been making sure that there's
Money in the
not
bank.
here,
Yeah,
right,
or
yeah.
line of credit is not part of that.
Yeah.
While we were managing the building.
Exactly.
So you're not paying, are you paying him TMI still?
No,
The PTO.
We pay the bills
we
directly.
pay them
Directly
directly
into-
for ourselves because otherwise the hydro, gas, everything, we've been having notices. The town notices probably is aware of the number of water bills that haven't been paid and the water. We will shut off your water notices that are put, which does nothing when our patients see these things. Yeah,
It's been 5 years.
Yes. There's $56,000 in
Yeah,
hydro
just hydro.
bills that have been unpaid, just hydro.
What sort of response did you get from Minister Jones' office? I have to ask, I mean, you know, healthcare is a provincial
Exactly.
mandate.
She is the.
There's nothing I can do to help. Go look local. I actually didn't get one response. I did not get a response to the latest email that I sent when I sent to you all and said that, you know, we have no other choice, we must leave. I did not get a response to that in any subsequent copied emails. Oh, thanks.
I haven't opened it.
Yeah, nothing.
I promise I haven't opened it.
No, we have not had any response.
The industrial road location, whereabouts exactly is that?
So Davenport's,
Davenport's, the old
Yeah.
Davenport's building?
the old Davenport's building, the other half of it, there's about 4,100 square feet, which is, it's industrial, it's auto parts, so it would need some work to be able to clean that out. I couldn't see patients with the smell of oil, but it's doable, and John is a local. We think that he would be a fantastic landlord. And the rent would actually be at par if we did not have to pay, again, the leaseholds about, right? We'd still have to redevelop that into a clinical space. And then, you know, probably another 75 to 100,000 is what we've been given as a prediction of what it would cost to build that out to make a clinical space.
How long would that take?
More than 6
More than
weeks,
5 weeks, probably
3 months.
3 months.
I'm actually surprised that seems like a little.
I think it's, yeah.
Yes.
I'd say it's not like we,
My husband just did a daycare.
Yes.
A lot more than that.
Yeah.
To renovate the space.
4,100 square feet, yeah,
That's us doing the work.
that's us, yeah.
That's why I'm
Yeah.
like that, I would be actually cautious about if a
Yeah.
contractor is giving you that price, cause that now scares me as well.
Yeah.
And this
Because
still
it's really
doesn't,
not-
sorry, this still doesn't help
David,
Yeah.
David at all.
But if David were to move there, there's
Yeah,
not room for it either.
or David,
Position and if then tight.
And would there be enough room for the drivers as well?
no,
It would be tight with just us.
we would need, we currently have 3,300 square feet. Access Physicians figure we could go down to 2,500 square feet, but that gives us zero space to recruit new physicians to the community.
Right.
Making that clear. You know, David at a minimum, probably 2,500. So if we were to stay together, we'd be 5,000, 2,500. If we were separate, leaving zero space for recruitment of physicians.
And how much space is there for that?
4167 is what I recall.
So you're double short.
Yeah, again, we would be tight, but again, if it was considered a temporary location with a look to 5-year plan, it could be doable.
How much space is available at Melwood?
We were told 1,000 square feet is actually David's old physio space.
It's not even the old physio
It's the
space.
old physio space, and there are a number of rooms across the hall. We were told that those are not available. And then there's the large meeting room that is used for events, which they've said they're not willing to redevelop. Despite there being meeting room space in the basement, that's them talking to us. We don't know whether or not, if there's pressure coming from outside, whether the county would change their mind. We have had no conversations with Sonia Pritchard or anyone else from the county. This is through Curtis. Yeah.
So of the host of options that you presented, which one would be most appealing?
Of the non-good, no good, so
Stay where they are and be able to protect the
Yes.
building.
that would
Yeah.
be the ideal space. Yes, we've invested, if we walk away from $250,000.
Like when we did that, we set up for health, and that's just it, like when we did that, we thought we were doing a long-term investment of a 20-year plan. Like, and the
Plan
thought
on
was,
doing
this
things in
was
the
where
basement,
we're
but
gonna
we haven't
retire.
wanted to help this current landlord.
Exactly,
So-
and we've got the connections, like we've talked to TMU, yes, we're taking a little bit of space over at Melwood. But eventually, when they start building out their flagships, they need more space, and ideally, and we've had this conversation with Jordan as well, is ideally it's not in Orangeville, because Orangeville gets enough. Like maybe we start bringing it more north and get some of those resources up north, right? TMU comes with a ton of other resources in terms of allied health and all the other perfect. And recruitment, right? And residents who may want to stay, so. It's similar to how Nautilus was. You train where you are and you tend to stay where you are. And Nautilus has been very successful in what they've done. So if we can start to do similar things up here, that would be ideal. We don't need more south, we need more north. And to try and start thinking of it in terms of the building will be here forever. The basis might change, but the building is here and it's made a medical hub and it's known as a medical hub. It's more likely to gain people to come in. Those of us that are treating now, we're not looking for the single souls. You're not looking to be a one-stop person by yourself. You're looking for a group, you're looking for allied health, you're looking for other health facilities that are close by, because that means better patient care. And so it is a bit of a stretch, it is a long-term game, it is a long-term thought process, but part of that needs to be structured into this, because otherwise you're always chasing your tail. Like this might be happening to us, but eventually it's gonna happen to somebody else too, and at the end of the day, like, don't need to go back to 2010.
If you look at examples in other communities, you know, in Orangeville in particular, the building on 140 Rolling Hills, it was fundraised by the hospital and the community and the local builders with the idea, if you build it, they will come. It is overflowing. Physicians came. I was one of the very first physicians that was recruited into that space. If you don't have a facility to put physicians, you're not going to keep them. So back to your question, in an ideal world, we stay where we are, ideally with a different landlord, one who is stable and is willing to support the healthcare needs of the community. That's in an ideal world. The other options are potentially temporary.
And is your current location listed for sale?
No.
Okay.
That's where it's difficult, get him to sell,
Yeah,
especially if he doesn't want to. I'm shocked that you didn't get any look at all when you put in your offer when it was power of sale, that
We
blows
put
my mind.
multiple offers in throughout the 5-year period and they all did.
That absolutely blows my mind.
You go sell it for $1 million for your market value, that you could. Building could be purchased. It's difficult to purchase a building for somebody who's corrupt. And then it has continued to be corrupt, and then turn around and have the only option is to give you money.
Right.
That it may be the way to be longer. Gains positions,
is there any connection between the series of landlords that
We
are,
think so, but
I think so.
we can't prove
We
it.
can't prove it, but we believe between the second and the third.
They
Yes.
used the same real estate agent, and they took and sold it for less than the offer that.
Yeah.
So I don't
And
know why you
under
would
the-
sell a building to somebody who didn't have some like connection for less.
The taxes are paid, right?
Yes, we think.
By us, yes.
Yeah.
Looking back, there's no option.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the challenges as we pointed out, it's not like we have an abundance of publicly owned available space. Like the town doesn't own a building, say, here we go. The clinical facility that isn't down, as you said, is all living. Yes, we have representation in the county. But that's not an asset that is controlled exclusively by this group. And it sounds like it may or may not work anyways. So there's no easy solution. I mean, there's nothing that this group could say, you know, but by next week, yeah, we can get you moved in here and you're up and running.
We wouldn't be here if there were.
Boy, if you're, yeah, exactly. So in terms of staff maybe taking a look at the options that we surveyed tonight, getting back to council with some options for us to consider feasibility of those options, how much time for this.
The next meeting is November 20th, that's not. So this time.
December
So, and I'm just gonna, like my name kept being mentioned, there has been ongoing
Yeah.
engagement, for months. We have provided every known property that's available for consideration to this team to consider. We've suggested that they go back, I know that that's a difficult thing to assess, and work with the family health team at Denver Oaks and integrate. We've done everything that we think in terms of plausible opportunities. Short, interim, and long-term is not currently what we can assess. Same as you have said, we do not own assets. One of the options for us to become a landlord isn't really the role that we traditionally play. We would have to assess the capital related costs. One of your proposals is we purchase the building, and I think the building, looking at buying it was about 2.2 million.
2.8 is what it was, right?
What we sold for.
No,
No.
2.8 was what it was,
Fair market value.
fair market value.
Okay, so we would
And that
have
was a
to,
couple years
for
ago,
council to
yeah.
consider that, there would be budgetary impacts, debt consideration, being a landlord. We've said to you that we've had exploratory conversations, very preliminary only, with the team at Mel Boyd Center, where those doctors in partnership with TMU expansion were looking for additional space. We made it aware that 420 Victoria, when it's surplus, there's gonna be some constraints on it, in residential, for example, that we identified that on a sale base, purchasing that property and potentially putting 3,000 or 4,000 per square foot on per floor on a 3 or higher level might allow you to consolidate with supplemental on-street parking, all of those kind of things. But that's what we were exploring with you. We were trying to find you a place to land, including that Dr. Racine, who purchased the LCBO, we thought we could connect you with him.
And I emailed him and I did not get a response.
We'll work on that again. Our EDO is trying to just work every option there is. But I think we said that with combined 10,000 square feet, you're less than we thought, that you were 5, but if you're 2,500, it's still a big footage to cover in a community that doesn't have a lot of property. So we'll keep exploring everything. Will cost what it would mean on the one example. I mean, I think you said you're paying $23.50 a square foot right now. With your TMI going up, you're gonna be at $34.80, which
With
is,
not our TMI, with our lease payments going up.
okay, so, and I know.
That's assuming TMI is not going to go up.
Okay, so just,
That's the new lease that this landlord wants you to enter.
so, I mean, and not to question the cost impact, but the commercial rates at 2 other commercial properties that are new are bang on in that ballpark. That is the unfortunate reality of the commercial rate.
But if you compare us from an equitable perspective of the other, clinicians in the
Exactly.
community, it is significantly more.
Right.
So if you're trying to look at an equitable location for healthcare in the community, you know, unless you're bringing in the Maples of the world, and I'm not sure if that's what you want from your residents, then, you know, we are not a large conglomerate that can go into a leased space that has a corporation behind us that can pay those costs.
And I think what we've acknowledged is that compared to what you're paying the cost for clinicians at the Melwood Center subsidized,
Correct.
right? And we also made, you were aware of it, but we also shared it, that when the TMU partnership was formalized, that the space that was equated to, I think about $11,800 a year in rent was actually for $1 or $2. So we're completely aware of that inequity, or at least that comparable. I mean, that's not a question, that's why the recommendation was to explore, and I apologize, I didn't know there was only 1,000 square feet. I understood that there was much more space available given what your needs were, so that was a wild goose chase, unfortunately.
But maybe not, right?
Yeah.
There's a large meeting room space
Happy to.
that is there, that could house, you know, us. So do you want to invest in your healthcare, or do you want a meeting room space that is only used once a month? And is otherwise empty if there's other meeting room spaces in a community?
There's other use of.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that's an option we're pursuing further.
Not an easy renovation,
No,
but
but, you know, as we all
Again.
acknowledge, I mean, I think what we're presented with here is a collection of
not,
less than ideal options. So that may be, you know, one that, you know, yeah, it's not ideal, but if it's workable.
Can we engage Sylvia Jones as well a little bit more, try and get something from her, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's gonna be any one-off sources of funding available.
Well,
I
no,
wouldn't bank on that.
So maybe what, if your current building, let's say it's not utilitarian, and us becoming the landlord has barriers for a number of reasons, so we can really explore that. If there's space that you feel is viable and convertible at the Melwood Center, maybe our next step is part of coming back to council with the meeting in December, is that we facilitate a meeting between yourself and the team, the town of Shelburne, and the Dufferin County. And that at least we fully explore the space that potentially has an opportunity for conversion, whether long-term, interim, or short-term. And then when we talk about that other potential, is if the other conglomerate team of doctors was serious about potentially going to 420 and building a practice-based care with multiple different practitioners within that scope, then that would be a longer-term goal. But if we can just, so we talked about before, like you're in crisis.
Yeah.
How do we solve this crisis? And crisis space is needed, right? So we need to support you fairly quickly, and maybe through Wade as mayor, but also a member of Dufferin County Council, we can coordinate this meeting, and I will ask my colleagues, my county colleagues, staff team, if we can facilitate this meeting for either this week or next week.
That just seems to me like the option that, you know, we have some degree of control over. You know, we don't own the assets in town, but certainly through our contributions to the county, we have some say in that. And certainly connections to explore that option further. Dealing with the landlord that doesn't want to sell, you know, we can talk about fair market value all day long, but if you don't have a willing seller.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So it seems to me like that probably is the best option at this point to explore.
Just to help us understand if we
Yeah.
can. So in terms of your current team of practitioners, would pharmacy and the hearing clinic be part of the team that would relocate? Are you all together, or is it,
If we need to
David-
separate, we separate.
so but right now, with the space potentially available that you're referring to, is that David's and the doctors at Melwood, if the county has capacity, or does that include the pharmacy as well as the hearing team?
Our current ask is to keep getting doctors in town first. That's really hard to put together, right? essence, moving to a smaller square foot, 1,000 or 2,500 square foot, will need a significant. There are people who are going to get jobs in this town because of this. I do $50,000 a month. Sanjay's gonna lose those people. There's a bigger impact than just patient load, but right now, primary focus is patient. But as far as pharmacy and museum goes, these businesses are looking at done. And they provide.
So no businesses remaining in that building. On the first floor.
We, at this point.
We don't.
We don't know. It looks as if he's given us all notices to evict. It may be through some other negotiation with pharmacy can stay. It has been made clear that the second floor is the open.
So basically doctors, but if we can't find a location in the Melbourne for you, David,
The only space available, so we did have, the county is that 1,000 square foot that I used to be in was great. There's one physio and we were a ministry health clinic to 100 total knees and total hips. We were at the ministry, which is what we did last year. We'll be able to provide that service in that location. So yeah, and we would have to separate. Again, that would take a significant amount of tenant equipment. I put $150,000 into this one for a 15-year lease. Now 5. So I don't know exactly what Sanjay at Parks is doing or here, right? Here it's a small thing. I would suggest you're right that you can go look at my spot or small spot because they only need a little small spot and next to the doctors. That'll be perfect for them. I don't know what Sanjay's gonna do. He's definitely worried about it. Maybe Sanjay can move into the data book. We're just looking at those options right now. Unfortunately, communicating with this, there's just no communication.
Okay. Well, I think short term, let's try to get something coordinated with the county. And I'm assuming it will be available.
We will make ourselves available.
And depending upon how that goes, Thanks. The December meeting is something to kind of provide some options with respect to the other options. I think 1,000 will be the one that looks most promising at this point.
If it was a temporary space, we could see that. I think, at least the idea that we're talking about of a long-term 5-year plan, in an ideal world, that's what we would be looking at. But again, do you build a building that is 5,000 square feet times 3 floors when there's already a building that already exists? It's trying to balance that out. And I guess the only other question is in terms of other community resources and fundraising that's been available. So if you are looking at a 5-year plan, what options are there? Other communities have fundraised, the Grand Valley Medical Dental Clinic. These are community funded clinics that have been put in place. And so it's not that we're asking you all to do this all on your own. It's we're willing to be partners. We have lots of connections, happy to be partners with it. We just can't do it alone anymore.
Yeah, and those are some longer term discussions we can have as well, but it's more immediate problems.
Which is on my worst enemy. You know what I mean? Like, seriously, no. These guys.
Okay.
Fine.
Well, I appreciate bringing all of this to light for us, and hopefully we can work towards some sort of solution. I guess we'll be in touch within the next couple of days to try to get something coordinated with the county. To start there.
Sounds good.
any other questions before we wrap up this, just for posterity's sake, and I just got a motion to receive the presentation by Councillor Deegan, seconded by Councillor Richardi. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first of two proclamations is for Veterans Week. Whereas Veterans Week is a time to honor Canadian veterans and soldiers made up of the young and old who share a common goal, keeping our country strong, proud, and free. And whereas Canada has a long history of providing military assistance in order to secure peace around the world. And whereas peace and freedom are not just words, but values and beliefs worthy of sacrifice yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And whereas Canadian sacrifice and valor will be remembered forever as a rich legacy of peace, freedom, and identity. Now, therefore, to show support for our veterans and their families, I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of Council, do hereby proclaim the week of November 5th to 11th, 2024 as Veterans Week in the town of Shelburne. I know Reverend Horsley is out there. He was. If he could maybe just pop in for a second. Yeah, he's talking. Sorry to push you on the spot. So we just proclaimed Veterans Week, and I'm sure a number of people in the community are now aware of the fact that our Legion Branch 220 is temporarily closed for a 30-day period. Unfortunately, that falls over Remembrance Day. You have been the chief organizer of the Remembrance Day ceremony for 18 years. I just want to reassure everybody that despite the Legion Branch's closure, we are still going to move ahead with the Remembrance Day ceremony. Thanks in large part to your efforts, the Dufferin Veterans Association and town staff.
And a live place, because we're,
And a live place.
they're paying for buglers, meal, all
Okay.
that stuff too, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it'll look a little different than in years past, but do you kind of want to explain what it's going to look like this year on Remembrance
Well,
Day?
because because I did a service out at the museum, got the Orangeville guys gave us a few flags. So we may have a bit of a color party, but we'll probably just march because I told the police we're not walking across the road now. We'll probably march from the barrier to the cenotaph. My plan was, because I have 95-year-old vets who can't sit out there for 2 hours. That's why it's so nice to have that, because we can have all the speakers there. Just do the wreath thing here. I have a new poster, the one you guys got up. I've been getting a lot of flack about the wreath thing, but our church has 3, which I'm using for the 3 veterans that represent the 3 branches of the military. I understand you have a wreath that you can lay. There's no sense worrying about government of Canada and Ontario. They can do it all at their big spots. They're not going to miss out. It's just our community. So, and then Neil Orifice is going to speak. Worship's going to speak, and I'll do the MCN type thing. And yeah, just not much different other than we won't have all those wreaths.
Right.
Now, I've been getting phone calls after phone calls about that. I will apologize to the town due to the fact that even some of the wreaths that I paid for, or most of my family members, like the Wallaces and the Hardicks and the Coles, break my heart, can't lay a wreath on behalf of their loved ones. I'm gonna do my best to apologize to them because they're all locked up. I can't get in there, can't even get our flags or anything. So I'm gonna do my best at that. But if people do bring wreaths, just so that I can keep my vets from being out there in the cold too long, I will ask them at the end of our official service if they wish to place a wreath. And that way I'm not insulting anyone. I know the clubs are disappointed. I know they want to do these things. And it's very hard for me too to stand up here, okay, who's got a wreath, and write them down last minute and then call them out. I can't do that. I got too much on the other go. So if that's okay with you all, we'll make it happen. I was a veteran. All the military guys work for the Canadian military. We all know how to use binder twine and duct tape to make it happen. So we will make it happen. And to honor our fallen and to honor our people in the town.
So what time should people show up here?
Well, if we'll try and start right at 11,
Okay.
if not 5:02.
Yeah.
And I'll be here 10. And Len and Fabio do a great job getting us organized for that. Sahela's gonna single Canada and God Save the Queen. Unfortunately, Joan Wallace will be the first time that Joan Wallace won't be able to be with me. Her chemo is really whacking her, so there's a lot of changes. But I'm a little emotional. This has been an emotional thing for us as veterans. And so we're gonna make it happen.
Is Walter gonna come out and do?
Walter's gonna do in Flanders Fields.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know everything will be fine. It's
So the biggest difference for community members who want to come out that day is don't show up at the Legion at 10 or 10:30.
At 9:30, yeah.
9, yeah. Come to the center a little before 11 and the whole ceremony will take place.
Yes, and thank you for blocking off the sound system and all that, like you've all done. all
Council
these
Security,
years,
and
so.
you're looking after the sound. Okay.
And Fabio, yeah.
And Fab and I are after that.
So you guys do a great job, and I thank you for that. So,
Well, as you say, we'll make it happen. And thank you for.
can I leave the principal's office now?
All right.
Have your parents bubbles.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the second proclamation is for International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Whereas November is Women Abuse Prevention Month and November 25th is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And whereas violence is the greatest gender inequality rights issue for women, girls, and gender diverse individuals, our community is committed to ending femicide and all forms of gender-based violence. And whereas femicide rates are on the rise in Ontario, with over 52 femicides in Ontario since November 26, 2023. And whereas last year in Ontario, on average, every 6 days, a woman or child lost their lives due to men's violence. And whereas Indigenous, Black, South Asian, and Southeast Asian women and girls continue to experience high rates of violence, including femicide, on the 2022 to 2023 Ontario femicide list. And whereas this month and throughout 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, we acknowledge our community's support of the Wrapped in Courage campaign and commitment to ending gender-based violence. And whereas there is an urgent need for greater investment and action to end gender-based violence in our community and throughout Ontario by all 3 levels of government. And whereas a Wrapped in Courage campaign flag will be raised during Women Abuse Prevention Month in recognition that the courage of a woman alone is not enough. It takes an entire community to end gender-based violence. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of the council, do hereby proclaim and declare that November 25th, 2024 shall be known as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women in the town of Shelburne, and urge all citizens to recognize this day by taking action to support survivors and becoming part of Ontario-wide efforts to end gender-based violence. So with that, there is a motion there for the town to approve the Wrapped in Courage flag to be raised in recognition on Monday, November 25th, and for that flag to fly through until November 29th. So mover and seconder for that. Councilor Donato, second by Paul. All in favor? All right, any council inquiries this evening? Not.
Gonna be directed towards Jim. Are we working on collecting the leaves yet, or? Because I know they are pretty horrible up in the north end, and subdivision, actually, if you go across Greenwood, in some areas there along the streets, it's just piled on the sides, and the wind's just taking them all over the place, and people just turn around and try to repile them again.
Yes, through your worship, operations staff have been out, they've covered, the areas a number of different times. The leaves are coming off late this year. We still have a lot on the trees, actually, too. But they are still circulating. Zone 1 and 2 up in the north end is our priority right now. And they're back at that tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday. So,
Because I know even the catch basins, they're totally full. If you ever have a good rainfall, that's gonna be all over the streets and flooded, because there's no way for that rain to go down there.
Jordy?
This is in regard to Jim, again, sidewalks. It's nice to see that, Main Street, the south side's been done from, Victoria to Jelly. Or sorry, yeah. Right. Anyway, Jelly. Okay, had a number of inquiries because of that about the sidewalks from Main Street going south on the east side of Victoria down to Mill. There's a number of areas there that are irregular, different sizes, widths, and a lot of the seniors that go through there have scooters and whatnot, and I've asked them if and when that might be scheduled.
through your worship, we do have a roads need study that we've done. It is based on a priority basis. So Victoria section, Victoria Street, south of Andrew, has been on the list, is on the list, not this year though. Main Street, getting rid of the ponding and sunken sections, so there's less icing, that sort of scenario in the winter, easier for maintenance. We're up the ladder a little bit on that one, but that is something we're looking at next year. In our current roads need study, it's listed on a 3 to 5 year basis. That falls in pretty well exactly with next year. So.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, on to reports. The first report is a report from the town planner regarding bylaw number 44-2024, which is to establish a public highway. Planner Steve Weaver is joining us virtually. Hi, Steve, how are you?
Very well, thank
Very
you,
well.
Mayor Mills. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So I think this will be a quick one. It's a very brief report. Just to put it quickly, through the review of the utility installation plans for the new townhomes and semi-detached dwelling that will go on the west side of Gordon Street, just north of Main. The survey identified, the legal survey for the land identified that there's some parts that make up that section of Gordon Street between Main Street and the lane to the north, which were not part of the original survey of the town, it appears, and were not officially established as a standard 20-meter right-of-way at any point in the past. It's been a traveled public road for many decades, as we know, but there was no record of a bylaw passed to formally designate those parts that comprise that section of road as a public highway under the Municipal Act. And as a result, utility companies that want to put hydro, gas, telecommunications, and so forth in that section of land owned by the town would need an easement to have access to repair and maintain those utilities. So to remove that as a requirement for each utility company and to simplify things, we consulted with legal counsel who identified that it's simply a matter of passing a bylaw, to properly recognize this section of Gordon Street as a public highway, and that makes it a utility corridor whereby the utility companies can go in and use it as a shared corridor. It's still subject to town standards as to where utilities go, and there's a sign off required from Jim to allow those installations to take place, but it avoids the need for legal easements in favor of each of those companies. So there are 3 parts, as you can see in the map appended to my report, and those parts have been described in the schedule to bylaw 44-2024. And it's a pretty straightforward bylaw. It just dedicates that section of land described in Schedule A to the bylaw as a public highway. So if there's any questions about that, happy to try and answer them at this point.
Doesn't look like it. Pretty straightforward. So if that's the case, can I have a mover and seconder for the motion, which reads that we will receive report P 2024-14 as information, and that bylaw number 44-2024 being a bylaw to establish and name lands as a part of the public highway be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. So there's Sample, seconded by Councillor Bouchardy. All in favor? It's carried. All right, thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the draft budget presentation. So just a couple of quick words on process. This draft budget was presented to council last Monday night and was supported at that level to move forward to the public presentation. So the draft that is going to be presented tonight has received the support of council. What we will do is I will have our treasurer go through the budget presentation, and then I think there are a number of people who may have comments or questions, and that's great. That's what we're here for tonight. What we will do after the presentation, we will invite anybody who does have a question or a comment to come into council chambers. Each individual will have a maximum of 2 minutes. And for the record, we would just ask that before you make your comment or ask your question, that you state your name and provide your address. So with that, oh, sorry, Jennifer.
To be clear, Bill, I did indicate with the crowd out there that there are 5 chairs that one person from each organization
Sure.
could
Yeah.
sit in.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to our treasurer, Carrie Holmes, to walk us through the presentation.
Thank you, and through the mayor, this is, already mentioned, a repeat from last Monday night. Nothing in the presentation has changed. So I'll just go through it. We're gonna do it as a PDF this week instead of a PowerPoint slideshow, so it's a little bit faster. There are a couple changes that happened during the course of the week that I did not have time to change the budget document and change the slide deck and still meet the agenda deadline. So I will discuss those at the very end, so the council's aware of a couple of minor changes. So, so tonight, for the public is the presentation of the proposed 2025 draft budget. This is the table of contents, which we can refer to later if anybody has any questions on any specific slide. Very easily. And that's the budget timeline. Tonight we are at the public presentation. Last Monday, as already mentioned, we had the council presentation. So this budget is a council supported budget. The next step would be to adopt the budget by motion. And if council chooses to do so, that can be done either tonight or next Monday. And then following that, we would prepare a bylaw to adopt the final budget by bylaw. So this slide summarizes the amount of funds that are needed to be raised by taxation. So we have 13 million just over 13 million in expenses and 2.7 in revenues. A lot of those revenues are our own source revenues. As we see provincial grant funding decrease, we are forced to come up with our revenues to help offset taxation. So the difference this year is a $10.8 million, which is the amount that is required to be raised by taxation and is our tax levy. In this budget, 1% of the levy represents $108,910. The October 7th council meeting, staff presented a budget framework report, and from that report, we had several recommendations. 4 of those main ones being that the overall tax rate increase not exceed 5%. We also identified 3 new positions. One of a part-time bylaw enforcement officer that would move into a full-time position, a bylaw administrative assistant, and a gardening landscape and maintenance contract position. We also included our own source revenue being automated speed enforcement. That would be a revenue neutral one in the budget, which means that the expenses would also be offset by the revenues. We also requested that a portion of the 2025 OPP contract savings be used to maintain a 5% increase in the tax rate. And from the discussions that took place on October 7th from the budget framework report, staff was also directed to set aside $10,000 for the food bank ban, as well as increase the feral cat rescue from 1,500 to 4,000. And those were items that were that came as a recommendation from the grant funding committee to be placed in the draft budget. So, as everyone is aware, we transitioned to OPP from our own police service. And during the costing that the consultant did in 2021, it was estimated that we would experience a significant savings in policing. And this is the first year that we have now transitioned to the cost recovery methodology. So in 2024, our OPP total billing costs were just over $3.1 million. And in 2025, our cost has come in at $1.6 million. That is a savings of just over $1.5 million for the calendar year 2025. At the time that we did the costing, the consultant's projection was $1.5 million as well. So our savings in at what we have projected. And these figures shown on this slide do not include any prior year reconciliation. And if you want to see a copy of the entire OPP billing statement, it was included in last week's agenda package. So the October 28th item, and it was listed as number 1 under communications. So on this slide, we've just given a summary of the difference in costs. And in the past, we had always referred to costings as on a per household basis, that the OPP does it a little bit differently. They include commercial and industrial properties in their property count. So for comparison's sakes, we've estimated what the total number of properties were for 2024, and in comparison to what they are for 2025, there is a significant savings in the cost per property. And those household and commercial and industrial numbers are provided to the OPP by impact. So just to recap, OPP reconciliations are 2 years behind. So for the 2025 OPP billing statement, we have a reconciliation from the year 2023. So our 2025 total savings was 1.5 million, and the reconciliation is 666,000 for a total savings of just over 2.2 million. We were required, in order to keep the tax rate at 5% as suggested in the budget framework, to take $359,000 of that savings, which will result in a transfer to an unrestricted reserve of just over 1.8 million. And that unrestricted reserve is being set aside so that it does not get lost in the annual revenue and expenses. If we were to take that money out of the expense side of the budget, you would never get it back without a tax increase, a significant tax increase to get it back. So staff have not yet prepared a report on any type of recommendation to council on how to utilize that savings. And that won't be just a 1-year savings. We will see that every year from now on, unless the OPP significantly increase their billing costs. But in order for that to remain whole, it has to be shown this way. And in our long-term capital plan that we did adopt several years ago, there was a line in that plan to utilize these funds for capital infrastructure costs that have been identified in our asset management plan. So if we do decide to utilize those funds in that regard, then it's sitting in an unrestricted savings for us. And this is just a year-over-year comparison of the revenue. So the majority of the decreases in revenue are attributed to less transfers from reserves, less bank interest, both of which are not sustainable sources of income. Under the protection services, you will see an increase of 147%, and that relates back to the automated speed enforcement and the automated parking fines that we have identified in the budget as additional own source revenues. On the expenditure side of things, this includes the year over year. So we did include the separate line for that one-time transfer to reserves to keep that amount in there as an expense. There are some other double-digit increases in some service areas. If you look at fire protection, it does say 21%. Since we presented this budget last Monday, we do have an amended fire budget that has come in, and their increase is actually between operating capital 24.5%. And that is one of the changes that we have to make to the budget. There is also in other protective services, which increased at 45%, that includes some of the ASC and AMPS costs. That a portion of it is also offset on the revenue side. And it also incorporates the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority, which was a 16% increase. So for the homeowner impact, this is very similar to 2024's numbers. The impact assessment figures still reflect 2016 values, and therefore there's been no change made to the average home assessment. So for
Annually, this budget would represent a $138 increase, which equates to $11.54 per month. A 5% increase in the tax rate, which equates to a 9% increase in the tax levy. And this slide shows the assessment comparisons for various areas around town. And if any taxpayers have any questions regarding their assessment, they are encouraged to visit impact.ca and go to the Understanding Your Assessment page. This chart was included in the 2025 budget framework report. The yellow squares indicate the new positions that have been proposed for 2025. This is a slide that we show annually, which shows where your annual tax dollars go based on $1, split between the different service areas. The operations for 25 cents includes cemetery, storm, and waste management. Other protective services includes, at 5 cents, includes crossing guards, bylaw enforcement, and conservation authority. The recreation and culture includes the town's share of the library, the CDRC, as well as the heritage, local cultural grants, and the Fiddle Park and town events and programming. Planning and development includes the economic development and the BIA levy. And for the police protection, if you were to look back at 2024 in a comparison, it would have shown 33 cents, and it now shows 9 for every dollar of taxes that you pay. The additional 17 cents is the one-time transfer to reserves, and if you add those two numbers together, it totals 26 cents. So it is still down from what you would have paid in 2024. For general capital projects, there are proposed $8.1 million. In addition to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, there was, many of these items were also identified in the asset management plan that was just updated in July. So in Parks and Recreation, we've identified just under 5 million. The operations budget is 2.3 million. Infrastructure is 782,000, and there is 125,000 set aside for town hall and bylaw. And to fund these capital projects, we generally try to avoid having to touch the tax base. In this case, we are pulling 1% from the water and sewer rates and the tax base, as well as utilizing some of the gas tax money. And many of those items are also tied to paying down existing debt. For potential grants, we have approximately 5%, and if those grants are not achieved, the project will not go forward. For reserves, we are utilizing 37%, and development charges is 55%. And this is the general reserve summary, a year-over-year comparison. So reserves are utilized only if a budgeted project proceeds. So if you were to compare this chart with last year's, the beginning balances for 2025 are not what projected balances for 2024 ended in. And that is because some projects did not proceed as planned. They are maybe not finished and will carry out over a two-year period or more. Or that project has been identified to be done in a different year through the asset management plan. So on this chart, we did not include the 1.8 million to be transferred for the OPP savings because we didn't want to distort the chart from comparison purposes for the previous year. And this chart also does not include the balances in the gas tax account or the development charge account, both of which are already committed to paying down existing debt.
So next we have our water and sewer budgets, which, as you know, the water and sewer operating and capital are self-supported. They do not cross over with the tax levy. So the water and sewer rates, we do a study using a consultant, which is done a minimum every 5 years, and it projects any future capital costs that would be required so that the water and sewer rates can be collected, billed and collected in accordance with the costs that we foresee in future for relating to water and sewer. So this page shows our water rate study was done in 2023, and these increases are in accordance with the study that was done. Capital side of things, we have projected that we're spending $2.5 million in capital projects. 2 million of that is in water. We are continuing with the well 9 and well 1 projects, as well as replacing a water truck and painting the exterior of the old water tower. Under sewer, we have just over $500,000, and that is the final quarter of the wastewater pollution control plant design and engineering for the plant upgrades that we've already identified as being necessary. So same with water and sewer, we always try to fund them from existing reserves, development charges, or grants. Part of the funding for 2025 does include some rates, and that is, again, paying down existing debt that we already have incurred. Balance is shown here with 12% coming from DCs, 20% coming from reserves, sewer reserves, and 66% coming from water reserves. So as mentioned with the water rate study, the amounts that we do collect in our water and sewer rates help fund our reserves for the future. And as identified, we had already borrowed for the water tower. So the development charges that we had set aside to help fund the water tower so that we wouldn't have to borrow as much will be depleted after 2025, and that is why the water and sewer rates now, starting in 2026, will pay down that water tower debt. We are still also saving for the waste pollution control plant, and if you look at the end of 2028, there will be approximately 13 million set aside in that sewer reserve. So if we if the expansion does not proceed and the status quo option is what we're looking at, the price tag on that was approximately 15 million. So we would almost have our reserves to cover that cost and not have to borrow that those upgrades. Council is aware, and I'm not sure if the public is following. We have applied for a $35 million loan or grant, through the province, and intake 1 we were denied. So we are applying again, and that closed last Friday, but we will not probably hear whether we are successful in acquiring that grant until Q1 2025, so looking at probably February or March. So if that project is to proceed, there are several combinations of revenues, including the grant, that we would be looking at to fund that plant expansion. And that includes development charges, long-term debt, reserves, and front-ending agreements with interested developers. And last, we always end on such a somber note, but this is our debt. Existing debt and the number of years that are left to pay for it, and the amount that is required under the Municipal Act for us to fund in our annual tax levy, as well as our water and sewer rates. So that's the end, but I do just want to highlight a couple things, like I mentioned, that have happened in the meantime. We did receive our OMPF funding letter, and that document is in the agenda package under number 1 in correspondence. So we were fortunate enough to receive an additional $39,200 in OMPF funding over and above what I've already shown in the draft budget. However, fire's budget came in a little bit higher than we had projected, so their additional ask is $21,880. So if you take that off the OMPF money that we found, we are still sitting at in the positive at $17,320, which staff are recommending that we take from the amount that was required to be borrowed from the OPP savings to keep the tax rate at 5%. We did also get a letter from the province, and I don't think, no, it did not make it into this agenda package, but it'll be in the next one, that the education rates will remain the same for 2025. That's
it. Okay, so before I open it up for public questions or comments, I'll just do a quick survey around the table to see if there's any council wants to talk about it first. No, okay. Sure.
On the fire piece of it, what was the difference, caused the difference? I imagine you rated it at something, and then they came in with an actual.
yes, so it is going to council, or it is going to the fire board tomorrow night. November 5th. They added an additional 100,000 to hire a consultant to explore expansion of the fire hall.
Our deputy mayor happens to be the chair of the fire board, so I'll let him provide some details.
Really, quite honestly, the biggest change isn't necessarily related to that, it's really related to regulations and training. So we have a requirement to be up to speed with our training for all firefighters by 2028. And this is that main step to start getting them certified to the new required levels. That's the main portion of what the actual.
Okay, so at this point, we will open it up to the public for questions or comments. As I said before, each individual, no more than 2 minutes. When you come up, state your name and your address for the record, and then go ahead, ask your question, make your comment. Council will take those into consideration. As the treasurer said, in terms of our budget timeline, it's slated on here as of right now. The council will be looking at adopting the budget by motion at our November 25th meeting for the bylaws to be passed at the November 9th meeting, or sorry, December 9th meeting. I'm having trouble with my dates tonight. So essentially what that means is that, you know, we do have some time between now and the next meeting to take into account the questions and comments that are made here during this public meeting. And council could make adjustments from here on out. But as I said at the outset, this draft budget that has just been presented is council supported at this point. So with that, open the floor.
Name for a little, this is 598-093 Second Line West Mulmer. In the presentation, I didn't see the specifics on the Fiddle Park plan, but I do believe it's part of the budget. We were wondering if we could get a little bit of clarification on some of it. When looking at the cost and revenue of the mini pot proposal, for instance, could the projected revenue please be explained?
Sure, through the mayor, so what we looked at is hours of opening. We looked at time of opening per year. We estimated the hours based on $6 and $7 as a fee, like HST. We looked at our staffing top. And then we looked at the range of revenue based on those two scenarios. We have worked with a firm that manufactures module mini putts, and we understand that about $250,000 would be our capital cost, if not less. We created a budget based on a capital recovery of that 250 over a certain number of years, if that was even something council wanted, as well as creating a sustainable source of revenue to help support future capital costs past 2026. We had identified in the last presentation, and I did that after 2025 and the allocation of all of the funding and predominantly only development charges, there would be no funding to support phase 2 until that funding came due. Is that enough information?
Well, yes and no. So the projected revenue was something like $172,000. And we're just kind of curious as to how that number could be that high.
So I did have in the chart, there's a small budget. Like I said to you, we looked at the number of hours we would be open, that there's a little thing that says here what we estimated it on. We looked at all of that based on an average of 2 to 4 people or players per round, how many hours would be open, and we looked at other mini putts and how we think they're fairly conservative estimates. And that's how we did it.
Okay,
So operating hours, May, June, and September on the weekends, operating hours daily from 9 to 8 p.m.
Right.
Obviously, we're not full every minute of every hour.
Right.
We also accommodated within here closures in terms of no charge, in terms of free days with respect to Council Mini Putt Day, Canada Day. That said, even if it was on a break-even approach, that is still providing the community with accessible both soft entertainment and recreation. However, we hoped that we would create a stable revenue.
So when I did the math, it ended up being like 6.3 people per hour for all 365 days of the year. And I found that a little bit excessive.
So that's not how we did the calculation.
Okay.
I'm just telling you how we did it. And this is not an uncommon revenue stream, but certainly if council would like more details to literally see the behind the scenes calculations, we're certainly happy to post that.
There is a brand new mini putt golf course 10 minutes up the road that has the same cost per play. And it's already existing. For those that can afford to play for $6 or $7 a play, they could also go to 10 minutes up the road to that one. I do not know him personally, though I'm happy to go and approach him and ask him if he is making $485 a day for 365 days a year.
So just to clarify, that course is $10 for 18 holes, and if you choose to pay 36, we understand it's double the cost. And I appreciate that it's up the road, but if we look back at the commitment that was made with respect to accessible and access within our own community, you don't have to drive. Additionally, and I understand the comparator, similarly, we offer a range of programs within our arenas, for example, when our neighboring communities have the same programs with their public feeding as one example. So within our program capacity, as identified in the Parks and Rec Master Plan, we were supposed to enhance our recreation opportunities. And while we understand that the majority of what we do in an outdoor environment would be free, there are certainly certain services that are probably reasonable to have a low cost entry. We did 6 and 7, it could be 5, but again, break even is a great outcome. But we were hoping to create a revenue stream, create employment opportunities, and then create, a buzz in our park with the mini putt. That was the background on it.
Great, thank you. If the Fiddle Park puts in an amphitheater as a concert venue, does that mean that the Fridays in the park at Jack Downing Park will move out there? And what would this do to the businesses in the downtown core, and will all events be moved to the Fiddle Park in the future?
Yeah, I don't think that's the intention. I mean, the last 2 years of Fridays in the Park have proved to be tremendously successful, I think, by any objective measure. And I don't think there would be any out of it. I can only speak for myself, but I don't think that that's something the council would be looking at to move that out of the downtown core. Part of the rationale of doing that was to create better utilization of our downtown, highlight what's there. I know several of the businesses downtown, I think, are seeing So some pretty impressive spin-off results from that. So that's something that, certainly as far as I'm concerned, will continue to happen in years to come. The amphitheater at Fiddle Park, would be there to provide a venue for other events. So it's not intended to replace what we already have, it's to add something.
I think our concern came from the survey that is there about the Jack Downey Park and about the Fridays in the park, and it said, would you still attend the events if they were out in Fiddle Park? So I guess that was just a little bit of confusion on our part.
Yeah, and I mean, that was just some background stuff that we were trying to figure out at that point. But like I say, that survey was done before the Fridays in the Park were initiated.
Right.
And based on the success that we've seen 2 years now running, I don't think that we're going to mess with that success.
Thank you.
Good.
Good, how are you? My name is Shelley Rowan. My address is 475-409 County Road 11. And I've been here before on the, as a food bank rep. But I had a couple of questions. So what events will the town of Shelburne be putting on next year for families? And will they be free? And will any of them raise funds or food for food bank? We've been blessed with Haunt in the Park, and it's been an amazing fundraiser, bringing in a lot of money and a lot of food for our food bank. So it's 3 simple questions.
So what events will the town of Shelburne be planning next year? The only event that the town of Shelburne currently plans and operates as a town event right now is Canada Day. That goes back about 1.5 terms of council ago, when the decision was made for the town to get out of the event business, and allow other organizations to do those sort of events. So Canada Day really has become the only event per se that the town organizes, sponsors, executes.
And Fridays.
Sorry?
And Fridays.
And Fridays in the Park, but as a standalone event, Canada Day is the one. We do have a Canada Day committee that will happen in one form or another next year. But again, I mean, I'm probably speaking as one, I don't think that there's a plan to create other events that we're not currently providing now.
And does the Canada Day event, does it support the food bank at all?
Not correct.
Yeah. Is there a donation provided?
The donations that people, in the past, we had the Kinsman with buckets out, which the Kinsman then collected as
At the gate.
at the gate, and they kept, we decided, after the Kinsman no longer supported the event, we would do the same thing with the intention of that money going back into the coffers for Canada.
Okay, fireworks.
Exactly.
And is the Canada Day event free?
Yes.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
All right. And does the town of Shelburne have an events coordinator?
No, and again, that was part of the decision that was made 9-10 years ago, for the town to get out of the events business. I think, well, Councilor Bernardo was there at the time, Councilor Sample.
It was a losing proposition for us every time we put on an event. We found we're not making money, we're actually spending money trying to make an event, and that is a poor way of using taxpayers' money. Trying to put on events and not making any money, there's no point in doing that. So that's why we decided at that point in time to get out of the event business and not have an event.
And as I recall, I mean, it was a bit of a crossroads moment, and if that was something that we were going to continue with, we were going to have to get awfully serious about it and develop, essentially what amounted to a department within town staff to run events. And we sort of looked at, what we felt our mandate was in a relatively small community. And as Councilor Bernardo said, we just couldn't justify spending tax dollars that way. The TAO just sort of reminded me, yes, we do have staff support that provides support for events. But again, we in-house do not plan and execute our own events, save and except for him.
I think insurance was also another reason, the cost of insurance for events that this town puts on was extremely, extremely, and that was one of the reasons we got rid of it. Because that was a huge cost that we had. Besides that, security was the other big problem. You have to provide a huge amount of security that's required and inspected, by the way, even if we try to not provide it, it is inspected. They inspected us twice in the last 2 years. But there was a few reasons.
Right, thank you. So then would the Canada Day committee consider taking the food bank on as supporting and?
Yeah, we can certainly discuss it.
Okay.
I'll just interject on behalf of the mayor. So there are other events that we've had. So I guess it's the determination of the, is it a map of event or is it like a rec program? So for example, when we partnered with the Canadian Dufferin Canadian County Black Association and they did Black History Month here, there was a request that you bring in non-perishable food. And there was also a donation taken up from the attendees. So that's one example. The town through the grant program supports a number of food-related organizations into food insecurity. There's also donation boxes usually at the holidays for not only a toy drive, but cash donations. We've encouraged people at Five Fridays in the Park as well to consider making a donation. So there's certainly maybe a list of different events that we can formalize with you on where we could be collecting food as a component of an event or even a special program so that people, if it's free, for example, and they choose to make a donation, they can do that. But we've done that for a couple of other special occasions. I think even some of the private renters have looked at whether or not they would like to supplement with special drives and support those families that need their support.
And sorry, where would I find that information?
So which one?
Everything you just said.
So I can send you an email, but what we've done in the past and what's available to you to help facilitate where people can make a donation if they choose to, we also can through our social media. And I think we're always sharing anything you're doing in terms of your drives with respect to encouraging people to support and make a donation.
Yes, I'm next. I'm Heather Holmes, 205 Victoria Street, Shelburne. I've got a couple of comments. My very first comment is that I hope that this town will invest some money in their speaker and their live streaming system. You had 25 people standing out there, most of them elderly, did not have a chair. This whole meeting should have been in the Grace Tippling Hall with a system set up for us all to be properly able to speak. We used to do that years ago, and live streaming is not a technically difficult system, so please do something. Probably the real reason I'm here is just a few comments. Number one, policing. I'm kind of concerned that we've got a big savings of money happening with the policing, but are we not paying a little bit more to keep the police up to snuff and maybe seeing a little bit more presence of them around our community? I think I personally would like to see more police than I would a bylaw officer, because the bylaw officer cannot do anything for us unless I as a citizen have called in with a complaint. Where a police, I can phone 911 and I can see police on the street right here when we need them, wherever it be, throughout our town. And our town is not getting smaller, it is getting bigger. I just think that that's somewhere that we do need to see some money. Maybe instead of it all going into the reserves, it should be put back into our police and keep a little bit on top of them.
Just on that point, and Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the money that is allocated to go into that unrestricted reserve hasn't been earmarked for anything yet. So, as part of that, to your point, one of the options practicability is to get augmented service in certain areas. For example, town of Mono pays an extra amount over and above their OPP contract to have a dedicated traffic officer on Airport Road. But the bottom line is we're saving $1.5 million in this first year. That's to be expected year over year. And yeah, I mean, that's
Sometimes
that's very
savings
well-
isn't always the answer, because when you lose, you know, a life or whatever the situation be, is it really worth it?
But to your point,
yeah.
you know, if council decides that one of the things they would like to do with that money is augment service.
Yeah.
That's an option.
Yeah.
Having some of those options though, to the tune of $1.5 million, I think is a good news story.
Yeah. The other comments that I have, is we're just a little bit concerned about, the investment in Fiddle Park. I'm not saying that it's all completely wrong, but at a time when, we need, more, 24% increase in fire, I believe, or in fire, yeah, I just heard. You know, we need more policing. We've got food bank, and our community is struggling to pay their bills, feed their families and so forth. Maybe some of that money should be spent in our community, and as we heard tonight, we need a new facility or something for doctor housing. Right off the bat, I would say, take that park money and put it and buy that building for those doctors and let them stay. We need doctors in this town. I am not one of their patients, but it is something that is definitely needed. I too, like Corolla, am very confused with this mini golf. It wasn't in the original proposed plan. And where and why is that all of a sudden come out? If you're looking for a cheap alternative to recreation for families and children in our public here in town, may I suggest a little bit more public skating? Like 45 minutes on a Sunday afternoon is not enough public skating time for children these days, or for adults of anything. You know, they go to school and they don't learn to skate. If they don't know how to skate, I don't believe they're even allowed on the ice when they go with the school, if they are going to school, programs that way. So that would be an alternative. I don't think mini golf is the answer for sure.
Outdoor skating is part of that plan.
Outdoor skating is, but not indoor. And, you
It'll be
know,
covered.
Board decision now, the council can't
Yeah,
force the CDRC to.
we don't operate the
Yeah.
CDRC.
no, but you could make a suggestion to the CDRC committee to get more skating or boost their budget a little bit. It's just an alternative
Yeah,
thought.
and there's no reason that the two can't happen at the same time.
True. I think you're gonna find it a challenge to have outdoor skating out there. The weather that we have nowadays anyways does not help to keep ice surfaces frozen. It's not going to happen, so boost it in the arena. Anyways, that's all that I have to say, other than I hope you really reconsider the budget that has been put forward for Fiddle Park. As I said, there's other places that money could be spent better.
We can't, on the money anywhere else.
On that point, I think it's worthy to clarify. So Heather, you had mentioned fire, you know, as one example.
I'm sorry?
Come back.
Sorry.
So in terms of the budget, just to clarify, because I think this is one area that oftentimes people misunderstand. The capital money that is being allocated for Fiddle Park is being derived from reserves. That is not the same pot that we draw on to fund things like fire operations. So there's the capital budget and the operating budget. So to say we should take the money that we've earmarked for Fiddle Park and then put it towards fire, that's just not the way it works. Right. Yes, development charges, and there's a whole host of areas where that that reserve money is generated from. That's not being drawn from tax generated levy funds. So I mean, just for the sake of everybody's understanding of that, it's not like we're taking money away from fire services to build something at Fiddle Park. Those are two completely separate.
And the fact is that money, that DC money is,
Can only be used for something.
it can only be used for parks and recreation. It can't be used for anything else. It's mandated when that money is raised by the province in certain areas, that development charges can be used. That money was raised specifically for recreation, so it can only be used for recreation. Can't be used for building anything for doctors, can't be used for fire, can't be used for ambulance, can't be used for anything else. It must be used in recreation. If we try to do something different with it, we will all be in jail.
Those are our rules, those are provincial guidelines and regulations.
So we do, just to clarify, within the development charge format, there's a number of different service areas where development charges are collected. But you have to do a 5-year study, and you have to itemize the areas of support that the development charge would be attributed to. So Parks and Rec is one area, fire is another one. There's certain area, and then there's a percentage that's collected based on what is going to be undertaken for that year. So our last development study, for example, would have aligned with our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and there would have been projects that are listed there to support. And it's, so for example, general parks. And development charges only support growth. So if you're repairing something, you're simply replacing it, it's not a development charge eligible project, it has to be growth. So the majority of Fiddle Park, for example, is defined as growth related, it's all new. It's not like replacing a playground in a certain park. If that's the case, only the percentage that supports growth is eligible for the development charge. I know that that's probably over a lot, but just to let you know that whatever you collect the money for is only what you may use it for. Okay, so you can't transfer one fund, and I'll use the example, if you were collecting X dollars for fire, you can only use it for fire. You
Yes,
can't
I
take
understand.
it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just, sorry, I wasn't implying, I was just trying to, like, when you suggested that we take that fund for Fiddle Park and pay for a fire.
Yeah,
We don't really agree with it around the table really either, there's things that we argue about as well, but it's.
well, then don't do it.
That's not possible though, that's the problem, is we also abide by the rules and the laws of the province. So we can't just say, this is what we wanna do, this is what we're going to do. We're legally not allowed.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Helen Fraser, 427 Old Village Lane, Shelburne. I've been in this community now for 51 years. And I am a concerned citizen. I understand the concerns of the Little family and understand the concerns of the food bank and the Holmes' family. They have put a lot of work into Fiddle Park. The Holmes' family, when they have a trailer park there, they generate revenue for the town. It's entertainment. My one question is, how much is it costing to put in the amphitheater?
It's $420,480.
And how much does it cost putting in the mini putt?
The mini putt capital is $250,000.
And what about the walking trails?
Walking trails, the multi-access functional trail, $268,450.
Okay, so add all of that up. And let's take a look at the practical side of it. Our kids were in we were a young couple, married in 1973. We skated in the old arena in Shelburne, where the farm hall is now. We were here and contributed to the new arena. The sides were put in on that arena that they could be lifted. The berm was put there so that they could have concerts. I'm asking you, how many times was that berm used?
Once, it was used once and it was.
For a concert, how many times was it used?
Ontario, or I'm not mistaken.
Sorry, that was my water bottle. So how many times do you think a cement amphitheater at the cost that you're saying is going to be used for any kind of people sitting there. You have to remember the percentage of Shelburne is seniors. There's another big percentage that's young families. Are those young families going to want to sit on an amphitheater with cement steps and let their kids fall down and get seriously hurt? No one can support
It's
their
not
backs on the amphitheater.
It's not, it's a naturalized,
So I
But
think
if
it's
they didn't
grass.
use the berm, are they going to use the amphitheater? So let's look at the practicality of it. Who wants to drive to the Fiddle Park, polluting the air, to do a walking trail, when there could be walking trails in the neighborhoods? And when I drive around through the town of Shelburne, I'm seeing trails closed. The one over on, when I'm heading out towards O'Reilly Street out that way, trail's closed. The one going down to Centennial Highlands, trail is closed. Why aren't these trails open? And let the people, instead of driving to the Fiddle Park, use trails that are local. Not have to drive, not pollute the air. It doesn't make any sense if you're trying to be healthy to jump in your car to go to a walking trail. And I do agree with Heather, with our climate changes that we have now, there were different times that we couldn't keep the ice surface open on Greenwood. How are we going to keep it open on Fiddle Park? And how many people are actually going to use an outdoor skating trail? So let's look at those costs. Think what revenue picking in the park has brought to Shelburne and what enjoyment it has brought. Think of what those haunted houses have brought to the town. Those are events that we're going to be losing. And the people need those events. The food bank needs the revenue from those events. The town needs the revenue from the trailers coming to park for Fiddle in the Park. Let the people enjoy the park. Yes, there are some things that I agree with. We could revitalize it, like putting the dog park way back in the far corner where all the birds are is another story. But let's take a look at what the park is actually be using for now.
Nothing. It's 2 events and Canada Day.
Mhm.
It's an
Well,
open
it's
field
3
that's
events
being
and then
not utilized.
what's it going to be? Like I just said, who's gonna drive out there to walk on a walking trail when we could have walking
We
trails
have
in our
walking
neighborhoods?
trails in the town, that's also part of our
But they're closed. Why are
No.
they closed?
Because
Are
they're being
they walking trails
revitalized.
closed?
yes.
Pardon me?
They're being revitalized.
I don't see the
That's what
one
I'm saying.
walking
Okay,
trail.
okay.
Because they're being
It
worked on.
doesn't help when everybody's talking the same.
I don't see one walking trail that's being revitalized except for a sign on it that says trail closed.
So Helen, you've thrown a lot at us, let me sort of.
I know, I'm
Right, no,
talking
and-
to
and
you
that's-
as a
That's
concerned
fine,
citizen.
and I appreciate it.
Looking at the practicality, you're saying, and I know there are always envelopes, that you can't shuffle funds from one to the other. I know that. Why can't you take some money from the park, put a roof on the swimming pool so that people can have
Not
swimming
that
lessons
simple,
all the time?
Believe me, if it were, that would have been done several years ago.
Well, I wish it
So-
was.
Where to start? In terms of the trail connections within town,
Yeah.
that's also something that we've identified as a priority. So it's not that we're saying we're going to shut those trails down and create a trail system at Fiddle Park and that's it. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. To your point about people getting in cars and driving to Fiddle Park to have to use them, part of the rationale is that as these trail connections within town become more connected, become improved with harder surfaces, those will be ways that people can walk on foot out to Fiddle Park, making that whole resource more accessible. At Fiddle Park, in terms of the 2 events, yes, it's really unfortunate that we're going to see a blip in next year's availability of park. But I don't want there to be any misunderstanding that this is going to be a permanent shuttering of these 2 events. That is not the case. This is a 1-year interruption while some improvements are made at the park. And after that, a lot of these improvements that will be made, I think will probably enhance the 2 events that are there.
But
I'm
you're not
sorry, I have
allowing
to
trailers
interrupt
to
you.
come in.
No, hold on, let me finish. This is not like we are shutting down the park for good or saying, look at
No,
what's
I didn't
happened
say
there in the
that.
past, cannot happen in the future. To Councillor Wagner's point, and this goes back 6, 7 years ago, when there were discussions about selling the park. As you know, that there was a huge public discussion at that point, and I think the council of the day ultimately made the right decision and retained that asset.
Yeah.
But at the time, there were a lot of discussions, and I know I was one of them that said, look, if we're going to keep this thing, then we have to find a way to use it more than 2 or 3 times a year. Having an asset like that sit vacant 50 weeks of the year does nobody anything. So what we did during this term of council, starting in 2021, I think, we went through, a very lengthy public engagement process. It included surveys, public meetings, modeling, all of this kind of stuff, which led us to this draft plan. And that plan was approved by this council in September of 2023. There was ample opportunity for the community to engage in this, and they did. I mean, there were over 400 responses to the online survey alone, and that's great.
Great.
So what we heard, I mean, one of the general themes that we heard is the demographics in our community are changing. Our community has become significantly younger than it was when Kevin and I went to high school. With that, come demands and expectations from young families that we need something to do.
Yeah.
And a several acre vacant park is not really something that's high on many young families' list of priorities. So if we can do some things to create a space that gets used and still does not, interrupt in any long-term sense the events that are there, why wouldn't we do that?
But are you also considering the seniors of the community?
Absolutely.
How? By renovating Fiddle Park. How are you considering the seniors? Because there's no bus service to get a senior out there, and there are several seniors that can't drive. Like, I won't drive.
But they get out there now for Peggy Park.
I don't, because we took the smoking bylaw off the table.
But we allowed smoking.
So I
That's-
can't,
Special,
I think
it was a
that's what she
special
means.
request.
so
and
I
we allowed it.
can't go out there because I'm so allergic to
But
smoke.
that doesn't have anything to do with transportation.
No, it doesn't, but I said I can't
Oh, I
get
see
out
what you
there. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying,
Yeah.
that I can't
Yeah,
get
right.
out there. But with no bus service, the seniors that don't drive, how can they get out there?
That's a whole other issue. So I
Exactly,
mean,
and that's
as you can
not in the
see,
envelope for Parks and Rec.
yeah,
I
as
know
you can
this.
see, the list of demands and expectations on council are never ending. Unfortunately, the monetary resources are finite. Yeah, we would love to provide an in-service bus system. We'd love to provide a covered pool. We love to do all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, trying to maintain a 5% tax increase year after year and maintain the services that people actually need and rely on.
They're demanding for.
But can you take a look at the Fiddle Park again? Look at possible ways of maybe scaling it back and enhancing the trails that are in the communities, that everybody, no matter what age they are, can get to those trails locally.
And those two things are going to happen concurrently.
They're
So
happening.
yeah, we are going to be improving the trail systems within town at the same time that we are making these improvements in Fiddle Park.
Okay.
And we're getting some hard trails, they're gonna be paved. That's why you're seeing closed trails right now.
So they're working on them now.
We're working on them right now.
The shavings from Old Sound Street's resurfacing
Yes,
are going to our trail systems
okay.
throughout the community, not just at Fiddle Park. So all of the interconnecting trails will be hard packed. Help me, Jim, hard pack asphalt.
We do have the wrap material from our construction projects. We actually have the RFP out right now. Has been closed. We have our contractor right there, as the council was saying, paving these sections of trails so they can be maintained year round, not just summer, so.
That's the other
That's what we
spin-off benefit of that, is that once these are hard packed and hard surfaced, our sidewalk plows can keep these trails open through the winter as well. So, these things are not mutually exclusive. We're pursuing all of these at the same time.
But why does every trail have to be closed at once? Why can't they close one trail at a time?
You'll have to ask the ask the supervisor that question, not us.
Through your worship, for the contractor to mobilize in and mobilize out on 5 or 6 different trails isn't feasible for them if they could come in and do it all in one shot, which we tried to limit that to the end of the year. Less traffic with people being out. It works better for them, we get a better price and we can go further with that amount of money.
Again, there are going to be some temporary disruptions, you know, on the trail, so to speak, to improve services. And, you know, there's a quote that I've always liked, and it says, change is hard in the beginning, messy in the middle, and beautiful in the end. You know, we're at that sort of halfway in between the hard part and messy middle. But I think what the 7 of us are asking for is you know, have a little faith in the vision that we have. I think what we're going to be able to create as a community is something that's going to provide a lot of benefit to a lot of people. And you
And
know,
what I'm asking is to take a look at it again and see if there's any way, like, that you can cut out a few things. I'm not asking you to cut out everything. Maybe you can cut out half the trees, you know, save that amount of money. Cut out a few things and put them into some other park and rec things for the town. Maybe some other playgrounds, some more playgrounds around.
again, we're working on that stuff as well. These things are not mutually exclusive.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
Okay. When something like this is so major to the town, like the whole population, can it not be put in the newspaper? Could there not be a forum held at the Stickling Hall so that anybody can have the information? The only way I got information was because it was on a Facebook post. And I think that's why you're not getting the information out to the town, is because you're not putting it in front of their faces. And a lot of seniors, not me, but seniors older than me, maybe don't use Facebook. And they don't know how to navigate the Town of Shelburne website. I have difficulty navigating it. So can we use the newspaper or other forms of social media to get the information out to all the citizens?
Engagement is always a struggle. The public meetings that we had for the Fiddle Park engagement, I mean,
I was at them, I know when I went with Heather and Greg, they were public
And I didn't know
engagement.
anything about
That was in 2020.
but when they were advertised, how many different locations, like it.
It was 3 days of meeting.
May I suggest that the town newsletter that we get quarterly be more informative? I mean, that's all, it's wonderful news to hear about these walking trails getting paved or whatever you wanna refer to it as. Tell us some good news, keep us up to date and let us know all of this stuff. Like, we're getting another more playgrounds or whatever, tell us, let us know all the good news. Don't make yourselves like
There's so much good news, we wouldn't be able to produce a newsletter big enough.
Well, good. One page, and it's not even double-sided all the time, isn't worth putting in the mail.
But if it's on social media, you can put as many if you want in there.
Sorry, I just.
Yeah, it is.
And I just wanna add one thing, Wade, Pickens Parks will not be able to go back to Fiddle Park after your renovations, so please readjust yourself because we cannot go out there. As you just said, that we would be able to use the park after renovations, we won't be able to.
After phase 2, the camping.
Where are we putting 150 to 200 trailers?
But that's like several years down the road. And you and Greg and I talked about that last year, and when we talked about those timelines, I remember for a fact, Heather, Greg said, oh, but by that point, we're not gonna be doing it anyways.
In 7 years, probably, but not next year, not after 2025.
But that space in the back is all gonna be available next year. What do you mean,
It
no?
won't work,
Why?
it won't work, it won't be big enough.
But it's 8 acres.
We wanna make it work, we can make it work.
It's not 8 acres, sorry.
That's exactly what it is.
But it is.
Well, it is, but it's not. Right. Hello,
How are you?
I'm Henry Little,
Sorry, Henry?
Henry, yes. I live
59809 second line West Mulmer. So I have been doing the hunt my whole life. I can remember when we started at the fiddle park and how hard my mom and dad worked at the building to build the hunt. Not just making it bigger and adding more stuff, but getting more and more people to come out and see it. It used to be a few hundred. This year, it was almost 5,000 people, almost half the town. Now, you are all grown-ups and make big decisions and work with lots of ideas. Can't you find a way to keep the hunt in the pavilion? Can't you make decisions to keep up some projects and not do others? So can we make the hunt bigger and bigger next year? Why is it not a priority for you to help us keep the hunt in the pavilion?
Excellent question, Henry. And before I answer the question, thank you and your mom and dad for everything you've done. So how old are you, if you don't mind?
11.
11. So you've grown up probably not knowing the year that Hawk Park hasn't existed. And I'm sure you got dragged out there when you were even crawling to help. So thank you for that. And it has been a remarkable thing in the community to watch grow. Again, as I said, this is not a long-term situation where we're saying the pavilion and Fiddle Park will not be available for this event or for any other event. But I think, we have looked, our staff team has looked at every potential option when it comes to carving out, a possibility to keep that pavilion available next year. And with everything that's planned, it just is not feasible for 1 year. But again, 1 year. So what we have committed to is finding an alternative and working with your mom and dad and everybody else that helps bring that event to the public. Working with them to find a way to make this event functional for next year until we can get over that 1 year hurdle and then life gets back to normal in 2026. So believe me when I say, we have looked at this from every angle and it just unfortunately isn't possible to do what needs to be done out there while making sure that the pavilion is accessible for that event next year. There's an off chance that it could be, depending upon construction timelines, not likely, but the problem is that doesn't give your parents and yourself enough time to plan. You can't plan on a maybe. So rather than say it might be available, let's just assume it's not and find a way to plan around that for next year. And then, as I say, we'll get back to life as usual in 2026. Okay, yeah, and staff will be getting a report to us on December 9th with some further detail about options and costs. So, but thank you for your question. I know that takes a lot of courage.
So the fact that it's not in the budget at all, like written for tent rental or any of that stuff, does that mean that it's not allocated or that there is still a fund that is possible for that?
We have reserves that we could draw on.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Henry.
I think what they're forgetting too is with the pavilion, there's gonna be structural issues with that we have to address, and that it needs to be safe in order to be used.
Yeah.
So that's why we can't use it.
Here. Okay, hello, council, Mr. Selby. Alan Selby, 340 Longbow Street. I have a few questions, sorry to prolong your budget discussion, but I think it's one of the most important things that you do all year. And it's one of not too many things that affects every single property owner in the town, so if we take the time.
you mind if I ask your previous position?
No,
So for those who don't know, Alan Selvey was the county treasurer for
13 years.
13 years in Dufferin County.
Probably helped to put together about 30 municipal budgets over my time.
And I was joking with Mr. Selvey before the meeting that every year, with the exception of last year,
I come.
you come and have something to
show.
say, and we missed you last year, so good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. I should probably have my feet up collecting my OAS right now, but I'm not, I'm still here. My first question is generic. It's kind of for the whole council, whoever wants to take it. I have a couple of more that are specific that Gary will probably have to. The first one is, I just want to open by saying I have no objections to anything in your whole budget. I think it's really well done. Your treasury staff has done a fantastic job. I congratulate you on that. It's really well put together. I know how to put them together, so I know what I'm talking about. You've done a good job. Why did council settle on 5%?
That was a number that was consistent with last year's increase. One of the things that I've said for a number of years is that if council's not increasing, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this or not, Alan, but if council's not increasing our budget, at least at the rate of inflation, we're falling behind.
Yeah.
So if we're not keeping pace with inflation, then I would ask the residents to point to council and indicate what service, what provision we're providing you would like to cut out. Because just like running your own household budget, costs go up each year just to maintain the status quo. That's not adding anything new, that's not enhancing any services, that's just maintaining what you have now. So 5% was a number that we landed on last year. Obviously, 0% tax increases sound fantastic, but in the municipal context, as far as I'm concerned, they are completely irresponsible from a fiscal point of view. And at some point in time, those 0% tax increases are going to catch up with you because you're not keeping pace with the cost of delivering the services you're delivering. So the short answer is 5% seemed like a good point to land, balancing on one hand the money that we need to generate to provide the services we want to provide, and two, not being overly burdensome on our taxpayers. And the one slide to show kind of the average increase, what that means on a monthly basis, was at $11 per month. Yeah. Times are tough for a lot of people. We get that. $11 a month. Hopefully that's something that people can stop.
Okay, the second one is really just a comment. You're really in such a fortunate position with your police savings. You probably know because you read the municipal articles that come out that it's the opposite for probably 300 municipalities in Ontario, where we're all getting slammed with large increases in our policing budget. In most cases, I've seen probably 50 municipalities I've looked at. They're between 15 and 25% each municipality, and it's translating into like 2 to 3% tax increase before they even start their budget. That's no other department, just policing alone. So it's making 5% is going to be tough to manage for a lot of other municipalities.
So we also knew, Alan, that a lot of municipalities were not paying a fair share of the OPP costing. They were actually very low in the amounts. And we knew that when we went into the OPP costing, that was one of the things that was provided to us. So we knew going into what we were going into from our consultant that we would be getting those savings and paying a realistic cost, not paying something that was way lower, like say Collingwood, Midland, because I've been reading the articles as well. And I know that they got slammed pretty good, but they got away for years and years and years with not paying what they should have been paying.
I was reading one of Renfrew County just the other day, and it was everyone. They're not large municipalities.
No, for sure. That, just on the policing issue, the one slide that really caught my attention is when Kerry breaks down, you know, how each tax dollar is spent. And last year, 33 cents of every tax dollar went to policing. And that's been around the same number, you know, for years and years and years. That number's gone from 33 cents for every dollar to 9 cents this year.
Your timing was really fortunate because of course Orangeville did the same thing Shelburne is doing, but they did it a little bit earlier. And now they're caught, they're in the same problem as the rest of us. Part of it, as you know, is their collective agreement that they signed and they were 2 years after the old one finished, you know. Anyways, I like what you're doing, setting aside a large chunk of your savings in an unrestricted reserve. It was mentioned that in general, it's kind of meant for capital needs in the future, but not necessarily. Like you say, it's going to be up to council to decide what to do. So I think you're very fortunate to have that flexibility as a council. The next thing I want to ask is a specific one. On the admin page, page 8 of 47 of the operating section, I was looking at line 7607 at the bottom, which is transfers to reserves. And it's explained in the notes what the 2024 amount is, but I didn't understand what 26, 27, and it kind of distorts your page 1, which is your expenditure, overall expenditures.
So, thank you, Mayor. So that is the continued policing. Because every year we're going to, our budget will be reduced by approximately, well, this year it was 1.5 million, so we're estimating 1.2 million in case we tend to get caught up in the catch up.
So what you'll be paying for police in the future compared to what you had in 2023.
Yes. So those amounts are just sitting there as a placeholder, so that the amount to be collected from taxation is not lowered by that amount.
Okay.
But once we pass the 10-year capital plan in Q1 2025, those amounts will have been assigned to something by then. But for now, they had to show there, because if you look on page 27, the policing page, it shows that transfer of 1.8 million in red.
Yeah.
And if you look out to 26, 27, and 28, we do show 300,000 in 26 because we're anticipating there may still be a credit
24 reconciliation.
for the 24.
In 26.
Yes. And then in 27 and 28, those amounts are gone.
Yeah.
So that's what is being replaced on the admins.
My other kind of small specific question is, on the police and OPP page 28 of 47, why do you continue to have amounts on the top line, 7150 police benefits?
So through the collective agreements that the former Shelburne Police Services had at the time of disbandment, that includes benefits for anyone that was retired in accordance with whatever their collective agreement was to age 65 or 70. So those are benefits that we continue to pay for former Shelburne police officers.
To me, your two big initiatives here in this budget are ASE system, which I like, and I wish you all the best of luck with that as you go about implementing it. I hope it works out well, because I think it's a good idea.
Automated speed enforcement.
I support it. And of course, the other big thing is the Fiddle Park development, which we've all heard lots talk about. And it's pretty ambitious 2025 capital estimate. When I first looked at it, then you've got 6 months, mid-May to mid-November, really. And my question is, really feel you can realistically accomplish all those segments of that project in 6 months?
I think as long as the weather cooperates, which is always an unknown. But yeah, the short answer is, I don't think we would have included that next year if we didn't have a fairly high level of confidence in the option.
Okay, and I don't want to talk about development charges, because I understand all that stuff. And as far as like just serving a certain part of the public, I mean, if you have those facilities in place in the park, the type of activities that take place in them can be geared towards different segments of the public. There could be an event that's geared towards seniors, that seniors would be attracted, and another one geared towards kids. It's not just for one segment of the population. I think it's organized properly, it'll serve all segments of the population.
That's the hope.
That's the goal.
Okay, that was it for me.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Good to see you back. We'll see you next year.
If I can get out of my rocking
Yeah.
If I can get out, you can get around.
Two more questions here?
Yeah, I'm Brad Reed, 232 Victoria Street. I'll keep these quick. I had lots, but a lot of them got answered through, of course. I just found out about the Soulville Park thing, so I'm kind of catching up on it. Is the vegetable garden, because I help operate that, is that gonna still be operating?
Yep.
During the course of it, okay. As someone running a sustainable developing tech company, I'm wondering, has there been an environmental that's been performed to Fiddle Park construction?
Do you want to touch on the technical side of that?
So thank you for your question, Mr. Mayor. We're working with our engineering company and our landscape architects with our planning team. And we work with NVCA, and we've already done some preliminary boreholes. We're certainly very cognizant of the original peripheral lands, and we're never being sold because they have environmental significance. They're designated, there's bog light. So, if you look at the plan, there's an area of swale, which is going to retain its naturalized component. We have some flooding there. Some of the changes to the topography are going to help alleviate that flooding. If you've ever been for an event at certain times of the year,
Yes, I saw that.
part of the procession. So all of that, to your point, is yes. Phase 2, which I mentioned earlier in the meeting, which I'm not sure if you heard, which is the top 9-10 acres. That was based on ensuring that the naturalization and the environmental component of the park is retained. So really what's only going on in that section post 2028 was walking paths and trees, including the expectation of almost like a memorial forest-like component. What we haven't undertaken in terms of an assessment of the land is whether there could ever be walking paths through the bog areas. And we know that at a minimum, the only way to achieve that would be an elevated path like a boardwalk, similar to that, but that's not budgeted. So to your point, the environmental integrity of the park has been something that's critical. So behind the community garden, which you call the vegetable garden, is all an area that would never be developed.
Yep.
And we're looking at that more natural with some fruit trees, and then there's the dog park in the top part. So that answer your question?
Yeah, but I'd love to see, I'm gonna actually email whatever, see if I can get more info, because I love to hear that stuff, that sounds nice.
Okay. So if you read the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, there's a sub-plan for Fiddle Park.
Okay.
A lot of that information in terms of the landscape and the integrity of the landscape is all summarized in there in terms of making sure there's a balance between independent access and recreation to low impact. So that's why you're not seeing sport fields and you're not seeing high active recreation, because it wasn't to impact the integrity of the overall character of that park. To keep it as an active, passive, open space, if that's.
Yeah, no, that helps a bit. Another question I was gonna have, has there been any projections on the cost to maintain and operate, Fiddle Park? Cause I know Orangeville had a horrible nightmare with, their pool, and I'm seeing this being a potential awesome thing, but it could also potentially lead to some ongoing costs.
So through the mayor, similar to when the splash pad was implemented, in our operations review, so we did a service build review and then we did an operations review. While the capital project was about $750,000, of which the Rotary was fantastic, contributed about $300,000, we indicated that similar to, I guess, buying a car, you have to maintain and build it. So within that operations review, we identified the staffing resources that were required to do the checks because it's a research system. We had to make sure that we were testing it. So yes, to your point, on the operating side of Fiddle Park, we acknowledge that there will be operating increases.
Yeah.
Predominantly, it was going to be associated with the original plan to do a refrigerated skating path. And because we couldn't afford it, we deferred that for reconsideration in 2028. That obviously has material costs, labor costs, and utility costs. So we know that.
Yeah.
We are aware of the costs, say, in our poly facilities that have refrigeration. On the programming side, there's costs as well. So if we run a concert in the amphitheater in the bowl, then there's a ticket, there's an administrative cost. So yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so you can't just build something and it
Absolutely.
runs itself.
And those costs will align with our 5% tax increases for the next 2 years.
Okay, so there's no cost this year because everything is being
No,
built.
yeah,
The
not this
new
year.
costs associated with developing the program side of it will be in 2026, and hence, if we can create a revenue stream that's not only a cost recovery, but potentially a revenue stream on top of costs, so the mini cut, for example, is an example of that, that was something that there's no cost to the taxpayer for that.
And just to clarify, our tax rate is set annually.
Yeah.
So the 5% is for 2025, 2026, we'll have to decide at that point.
Okay, so what I did hear there was if everything works out the way it's supposed to, then yes, it won't affect us and it won't affect taxpayers. But I do still have some concerns, and I wonder if the amount of the community that had feedback on this project, I think it was like somewhere under 500 people, that was collected, that's what I heard the feedback was. I'm not sure if that was quite enough. Maybe we could table this project for a while so that we could get better feedback from the community and maybe figure out if the facility could be tuned just to our needs a little bit better.
Short answer is no, and I mean, council approved this plan a year ago in September. And that was after a year and a half's worth of engagement.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, 400 to 500 people in an online survey alone is definitely considered statistically significant feedback. That was in addition to in-person presentations and everything else.
Would we want more? Sure.
Yeah,
But I beg people, I posted it so many times.
a little like voter turnout.
Yep.
Municipal elections typically generate about a 30% voter turnout rate, which is abysmally low. But that's what it is. So yeah, to your point, Lindsay, we'd always like more people. But I remember at the time when I heard it was, close to 500 people, I was really pleasantly surprised that we got that many.
That's almost
Yeah.
And this will be my last one, it's totally unrelated to everything else we just asked. I was interested to know what was the spending on, I heard some numbers, but I wanna know, hear from the horse's mouth per se, what was the spending on the garden, boxes and stuff for the Main Street? What is that annually?
Sorry, on Main Street?
On Main Street, those little boxes.
Like the flowers?
The flowers, the hanging baskets, all that sort of stuff, what is the budget on that annually? Just curious, if anybody knows ballpark, what it was.
And part of it's shared with BIA as well,
Yeah.
right?
There's a support. There's a support culture society.
They take care of it.
They don't do those costs. That's the town. So we do fall planters and then we also do that. And that was part of the revitalization of the downtown in terms of the aesthetic. The community improvement plan is part of the fall moves. to ensure that the aesthetic of the downtown is better, and that was also aligned with the park. But we certainly, if you give us your email, I know it's over $10,000 for sure.
Okay.
It's under 30,
Yeah.
but we just have to get the right amount because we have enhanced the amount of money we've spent on the basket and all of the aesthetics quite a bit in the last 5 years.
Sure. I would love to get in touch with you guys, because our company might be able to help you save some money there, but also I'd love to help you with
There you go.
possible plans, like environmental, friendly gardens for the Fiddle Park project, and species that would be specifically taken to this area.
That would be great. Native species are.
Native species, yeah, and butterfly species.
Yep.
That's it, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brad. Okay,
Before I present my question and my statement, can I ask follow-up questions about what was just discussed there?
sure. Two minutes is what we've tried to allocate for each person, so however you choose to use it.
I will skip that and say my statement, and then if there's still time, then I'll.
Sure.
Okay. So my name is Kristen Hooper. I live at 384-154 20th Side Road in Amaranth. And I wrote out my statement so that I can make most of my 2 minutes. I have reviewed the proposed plans for the Fiddle Park improvement. I have concerns as a citizen who has seen the dwindling tourism in Shelburne since the Fiddleville days. There is a section in the plan for the Fiddle Park vision and guiding principles, and it refers to the park drawing visitors and supporting local tourism objectives and phasing out camping. You're completely contradicting yourselves in that sentence with this. You're planning to phase out the main aspect of this park that does attract tourism. Mini putt is a fun idea for locals, but it's not your tourism draw. The tourism you want to attract is coming to see the music festival, which is the only logical use of the proposed amphitheater seating in this setting. And they want to camp while they're here. It's part of the festival experience. If you've ever been to a music festival, you know that people want to drink, be social, and not have to worry about planning a sober ride for their night's stay. Without camping, there aren't other options in town for people to stay. They have to travel to a hotel, and that also brings up issues of safe traveling and making sure there's dedicated drivers. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel here, why don't you fix what's broken in an existing and mostly successful situation? Invest some of the budget into replacing the incorrectly installed water lines for camping, and find a way to capitalize, support, and expand on the ever-growing events that do draw visitors to town. And if you're not willing to consider this, I'd like council to enlighten us on the plan on how new events will be attracted to this revamped space, because the current events held at Fiddle Park have been entirely created, promoted, and funded by private efforts. I heard Councilor Bernardo say that we're not in the business of event planning, but you are driving out the people who are.
Okay, appreciate the comment. Again, based on the feedback that we received from residents within the town of Shelburne, camping was not something that was listed awfully high on the list of priorities. Yes, you're absolutely right that one event that does generate a number of people here, but again, that's one weekend out of 52. And what we're trying to do is find ways to develop this park that are going to create other sources of attraction, other uses. And let's not get caught up on the tourism aspect. We're not necessarily talking about tourists coming from far and wide. You live in Amaranth. I suspect you use a lot of parks and recreation facilities within the town of Shelburne.
I grew up in Shelburne, yeah.
Yep. So I mean, that's good. Tourism can be local. Tourism doesn't have to be people from the GTA necessarily. But the idea is that if we can create some amenities within this space that can be used on a more regular basis by families who live here and in the surrounding areas, then that's what we hope to achieve. Something that is going to allow this great space that we're fortunate enough to have to get used more than 2 or 3 times a year.
So I'm not proposing that you kibosh all of the other ideas. I'm saying maybe reevaluate where you're spending and use some of what is existing there. I know the water lines that were put in are not sufficient for what was supposed to be intended. Why not fix that and keep the camping as an option? It doesn't even have to be as big an area as what is already there, because I know it's a huge empty space for a lot of the year. But if you still keep that option and then work with the events that are existing to help us grow, the haunt would love to do more than one weekend in a year. Like, I know that there are other Halloween events in town during the month of October, but can't the town work with us and help us grow something that takes place in that park for the whole month of October? Or help Pickin' in the Park grow to be a bigger event than what it is, because they started something wonderful, Fiddleville died, and that's just the way it is, it evolves into that, but help Pickin' in the Park grow into something bigger and something that puts us back on the map. Still keep, some of the plans to add year-round activities for town people. But, I mean, can't we all work together and sort of have a little bit from, what everybody wants? That's kind of what I'm proposing.
So, is there a plan for someone to take over Pickin' in the Park then? Because as we heard tonight,
Yeah.
it's likely not going to be facilitated forever. The plan is potentially within the next 7 years that it won't be operating anymore.
Yeah, and I'm not associated with them, I just support their cause because I
okay.
know how much money they put into Fiddle Park and also their frustration level on this. I'm involved with the haunt.
Yep, no, and I understand that. Our concern around the table now is looking forward to that potential, right? If they're not going to be facilitating forever kind of thing, or at least for a considerable amount of time, then us leaving that, space open, for an event that may not continue, I'm not sure how beneficial that would be either. I mean, I guess it could be redeveloped at that point. But that's the other option as we've given is there's 8 acres up there and that will not be, phase 2 we don't have the money for phase 2, so it's not going forward anytime soon. So by the time phase 2 could go forward, Pickin' in the Park might retire.
I think my point is more if the events that are already existing feel that they're supported by town rather than being pushed out. Other people would be happy to take over when Greg and Heather decide that they're done facilitating this. It would encourage people in the community to get involved. Every year for Haunt, we have volunteer calls and we get lots of kids in high school, we get some adults in the community. If we felt like we were being supported by town, I think we'd get a lot more people involved. People who would want to carry this forward as the years go on.
Let's just try to keep a bit of perspective though, again, I mean, the town has supported both events extensively in years past. We plan on doing that going forward. This is a 1-year interruption. That this is not like we're saying Fiddle Park is closed for business to these 2 events going forward. That this is a 1-year interruption which can't be avoided because of the things that we're hoping to do to improve the facility. So to say that the town is not supportive of these 2 events, I just really don't think is accurate. We provide financial support, we provide in-kind support year after year. These are some great partnerships and we're looking for these partnerships to continue. It's just next year is going to be a tough year to make it all work at the same time. So we're all going to have to work together to find a way around that for 1 year. But it's 1 year. So, I guess Pickin' in the Park has made arrangements for next year to relocate to the Ag Center. That I understand doesn't work for you guys. But, again, when we work together, I'm sure we're going to be able to find some way to make this happen next year for you. And then again, in 2026, we'll come back, we'll have an approved park facility, which hopefully will provide, some additions. It's a 1-year interruption, so let's not lose sight of that.
I just feel that the money isn't being spent in the wisest way. You want to put in things like amphitheater seating, but the people who are going to be using it, Pickin' in the Park, they don't want that for their event and they won't be able to use the facility, not but park for camp.
But it's not just about them.
But who else uses the park?
This
But
is
that's
the
the point.
point, is we're trying to
Okay, so tell
develop
me
it
how-
for the community.
Then tell me
All of
how
the
council is going to bring more events in. What's the plan? We don't have an event planner. We don't have, we're not in the business of planning events, is what I heard. I heard that right from his lips. So what's the plan to bring in more events? Because Pickin' in the Park has promoted themselves and created their event on their own. They have dealt with the funding for it. The Haunt has done the same. They have created it, they have grown it, they have promoted it. Every year they work their butts off to promote it. And they secure the funding for it. So
Yes,
who
we also
is
have-
bringing in the new events that are going to fill the amphitheater seating and who are going to use the park?
I think we heard earlier tonight, if you build it, they will come, you know.
That's a very hopeful thinking.
Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but the reality is, if the facility is not there, I can guarantee that nobody's gonna use it. So let's build it, let's provide that opportunity for other organizations. I mean, you guys started from nothing, right?
The YMCA said that it would provide them with more options for their summer programming and their camps.
Like it opens a whole host of other options without really detracting from anything that's there. If one group decides they don't want to use it for whatever reason, I guess that's their prerogative. In my mind, it only makes sense that it would, you know, provide a better seating arrangement for the event they're running. If they disagree, then, you know, I guess they're entitled to that. I would suggest maybe other reasons at play. But, you know, that's one component of a much larger plan. And, you know, again, creating a naturalized amphitheater is not going to detract anything that's already there, and it's going to provide another amenity that hopefully will enable other groups to come in and use it.
And what happens in 5 years from now if we look back and say nobody's using it and we're still only utilizing the park for 2 events a year? Then what's
As I
going
said,
to
it's not
happen?
going to detract from anything that's there being used now.
No, that's true, but how do we justify the money that was spent if we look back and say we haven't gained any future events or, you know, it's overgrown, we're not getting any
It won't be
revenue
overgrown.
from
It won't be overgrown.
because we're gonna pay to maintain it. So what if we're not getting the
We
revenue?
being Shelburne taxpayers, yeah.
Yes, and I did hear you say earlier about, we'd be happy if we broke even on the mini plat, and then you turn around to the gentleman in the yellow here, who was just here and said, hopefully we won't be increasing taxes because, we're gonna generate revenue, but you just contradicted yourself again. So, I mean, I guess I'm just saying,
I'm not
we
sure
look,
I follow the line of logic.
if we look back in 5 years and say that the facility isn't being used to its full potential, how do we justify the money that was spent?
If we look ahead 5 years, back in 5 years, and there are 10 events there, including, I mean, I can even think of simple things, like even for Haunt in the Park, you have an amphitheater, show a horror movie one night, you know, or incorporate that into your event. Have a kids horror movie. I mean, there's lots of opportunities there with with that specific facility. There's even, I mean, I don't know logistically how you guys might be able to do this, but could you incorporate the first level of the amphitheater in your haunt? I mean, there's an extra space, there's extra space there, all of a sudden. Right now, the park's getting used twice a year, right? And this is, as was said, a short-term, you have to break some eggs to make an omelet, right? But it's gonna be an awfully damn fine omelet for 2026. Right? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to, yeah, okay.
I'm Jeremy Little, 5980 Second Line West, Melbourne, Ontario. Great. First of all, I'd like to thank you for donating your time and stuff to come up to the haunt this year. That was awesome. Councilor Shardy.
I did last year. I couldn't make it this year. I'm
No,
sorry.
I know, it left us hanging, but thanks anyways. Yeah, it's a 1-year interruption. I get it. It's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of life. It seems like you're throwing a lot of ideas at the wall and just trying to get something to stick. Cause like 6 weeks ago, when we just discussed this in a meeting, it's a completely different plan for the park today than it was 6 weeks ago. Parking's gone, no,
No.
so I heard we went from 130 car space paved lot to gravel.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation that's floating out there. I'm not sure where it's originating from. The plan is the plan that was approved in September of 2023, with the only addition being the mini.
Yeah, okay.
So just to
So-
clarify, and when we met with you, we indicated that there be some shifting in the project scope.
Yeah.
So because certain things that were in the 2027 schedule, and council knew this, that we adjusted plan based on what components within phase one would be in phase one. And the refrigerated skating rink was identified as a $1.8 million cost, we outlined that.
Oh, yeah, no.
That it really wasn't affordable, so instead we took the playground and we moved it up, and we took the basketball court and we moved it up. So the only change to the components of the entire project over the range of capital years was the addition of a mini. That is it, and that was in the space comprising about less than a quarter of an acre in the middle, which was unused space, and it was simply predicated on a potential revenue stream and a revenue option. So I just need to clarify that in terms of events.
And that's.
So what council had before them through the budget process, and I presented the entire overview, my colleague Steve is on the screen, was to ensure that in their approval of this budget that's come before tonight, that they had an understanding of the components of what was being funded from the development charges, which is no profit to the taxpayer, in phase one. So, and I think I would just like to correct some of the misinformation potentially.
Well, and
the word
sure.
concrete,
Yeah.
it is not a concrete amphitheater. It is an amphitheater with tiered bowl seating with arbor stone, which can form a component of it. But similar to other outdoor amphitheaters that are in many communities, I'm just gonna say, so what happens is there's 6 tiers of bowl, then so there's a seat, I'll say seat, which is armor stone. But between that seating and the next seating, if that's what you call it, is room for chairs. So for example, if we're running a concert similar to we would in Grace Tiffany Hall and it's a paid ticket, you can either A, if it's a free one, you can bring your chair, or B, will provide the chair. So I just wanted to clarify that, because what we envisioned in the plan was that when the skating path, which we've deferred, but now even the outdoor rink under the pavilion, recognizing it's not refrigerated, it's natural, we envisioned that bowl would be the seating. That people could sit there, put their skates on, get the hot chocolate from the concession, whatever. People can sit, this is a seating area as well. This is not simply for events or ticketed or anything. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Because we had looked at for a movie, for example, whether in the design it would be seating or whether it could simply be a hill, which is very common. But one of the things about the hill is that then there's really not any winter capacity to use it. So hopefully that just gives an out, whether or not we ran events or had concerts or had movies, the outdoor seating was still to support the refrigerated skating track and or the concession and or other community events like Canada Day that require that kind of mechanism to assist us from always bringing everything in. So that's that.
So what the problem probably lies in is a failure to communicate your plan clearly to everybody. Is what I'm seeing, because
But
even
again-
the stuff I had in our meeting is different than what was actually discussed. So you have people here that all their job is to communicate what you guys do on a daily basis, right? So should you not maybe utilize those resources you have to let everybody know what is going on?
I'm not sure.
And we've tried, again, and I am gonna have to draw the line on some of this discussion, because we are veering from budget discussion into a sort of.
A general.
No,
I didn't
open
want to steer
season
this.
on the Fiddle Park master plan, which again was approved a year ago in September, following months of public engagement. So that ship has sailed, this plan has been approved.
I completely understand, I do.
And in terms of communicating, as I mentioned, I think it was Helen Fraser, like, there's no perfect science in getting
No,
stuff
there
out to
isn't,
people.
but to deal with the misinformation, maybe you need to put a clearer.
We could have 15 people full-time employed, I think, dealing with misinformation, just.
But
Yeah.
it's just, you know.
The plan is what it is, it's available publicly on the website. I mean, if people are concerned about what's included in the plan, go to the source and look. Don't listen to chatter on Facebook.
Send a question. I say it all the time too, question period, submit your questions before noon, on council nights. Like, I don't know how much more I can try and get correct information.
Well, I see you all the time, I said, I know you try hard. I know. And I'm not going anywhere, I plan on having a haunt park and I plan on Henry taking it over one day, so it will.
We want that.
Well, yes, and
We want
with any
that.
luck, it will outlive all of us.
Yeah. We want that, we don't want you going anywhere. don't.
We just need some direction in how we're gonna keep carrying forward, at least for next year.
Yeah, and again, you know, I appreciate the fact that you get that, you know, that this is a 1-year interruption and, you know, thankfully we know about it this far in advance that we can, I'm sure we'll find a way to make
Well,
this work.
and that's something we have to sort out sooner rather than later, so we can keep moving, so we can let our almost 5,000 people know that we're not there.
But again, I think it's better to be upfront about that than to say, well, you know, we
Well,
might
and
be able to make
well,
that
and that's
happen.
what we're trying to avoid on our part when we're telling people what we're going to be doing next year. So let's get a solution sooner rather than later, make it happen.
So what we require from you guys is compromise as well.
Oh, yeah, and
Right.
we're all about compromise. So.
Unfortunately, I mean, the whole general idea of compromise is both sides have to give up something.
Yep.
Right, so
Yeah, both
we have
sides have to
to,
give up something.
yeah, we have to work together because we don't want to see you leave and we don't want to, you know, have you choose another municipality to do your event in. You know, we acknowledge the benefit of both Pickin' in the Park and Haunt. We know this and we've said it multiple times as well. I've said it multiple times that, you know, we want you here, we're trying to work to make sure that that is facilitated.
Well, let's make it happen.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, any more budget questions?
I just have a statement or two,
Okay,
and I know 3 people here who know me well.
we'll let Mrs. Lloyd make her statement and then I think a few of us could use a
I'm
break.
just gonna leave it with you to read at
Oh,
your leisure
okay.
time,
Well, that's fine too.
because I'm disappointed in tonight, very disappointed. You have a beautiful theater out there, what are you gonna fill the amphitheater with? And not everybody has internet and watches internet in town, a lot of people do not. Okay, good night.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody left?
There's no budget questions, but they are Fiddle Park Master.
Yeah, but that's not the night for this. That was a year ago, September. Sure.
Karen Lang, 239 Main Street East in Shelburne. Don't worry, I'm not gonna talk with my pass. I know it's hard to feel the old here. I know about Councillor Sample, call last week, I give up. Anyway, but that's not what I'm here for. I think your grandiose plan for the park is really great. So it's a wide open space that's not being utilized. Just quickly, are you planning on putting it out there that we could name some trails after some people that are special to our community?
We'll name one after you.
I'm not a runner, so.
I think we have a facility naming policy on the books now, so I mean, if there's something, we haven't named trails in the past, that's not to say we can't.
Yeah.
Can I make
Good idea.
just a
I
quick
like it.
suggestion? This is a dear friend of mine and a dear friend of Glenn's. His name's Don Doan. Don, he has a trail named after him of the city of Brampton because he worked for the rec department there. And unfortunately, Don came down with ALS about 5 years ago. And he was a marathon runner, and I think he got Glenn started in running. But anyway, he was a marathon runner, he ran marathons and everything, and when he came down with ALS, he just wouldn't give up. He would do like thousands of kilometers on his recumbent bike, but long story short, he grew up in Shelburne. And he has raised thousands of dollars for ALS. And I think it would be nice that he could be commemorated in our town. Like I said, he grew up here. Walter probably knew him as well.
I know, but you could
My
write
brother
a
played
little
ball.
in the background.
Pardon?
My brother played ball with him.
Anyway, that's just a suggestion. I don't know, how can I put a note there that I would really, really like that if they could name one trail or put a plaque up for him or do something.
Can you write a little bit about it, Karen, so that we can put something on that plaque?
I could.
Jennifer?
Through the mayor, we do have an application process for naming a facility, so I can send a copy to you.
Okay, perfect.
There you go, you can write a
So
little bit on it.
so I told her to be quick. But I know it's getting late.
All right,
Actually.
so with that, why don't we take a 10-minute break, then we come back, we'll have a motion to sit past next year.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm going to say, why don't we make a motion now, so that I can take a break.
We're adjourned just before 9:30.
You're waiting for your turn?